a capacity for kindness. So, close your eyes. Take a few moments to breathe in and breathe out. But I would say on a deeper level, it's more like when we say work on yourself, that involves all kinds of like things about moving your life forward. And they struggle with
motivation in these things.
It's because when I don't think I'm worth it, I'm not worth fixing.
When you develop empathy and compassion for other people, there's going to be room for someone else in the relationship. And then this in turn is going to reduce the feeling of being an object. Now two people can connect. And now it's not about getting your needs met in starvation. It's about two human beings forming a relationship.
wishing for the object of your metta, that these things happen to them. So you'll repeat this thought. May this person be happy. May this person be free. And may this person be at peace.
Alrighty, chat, let's get started. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational or entertainment purposes only. If y'all have a medical concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. And good luck with that. Highly recommend them. Huge fan of licensed professionals. Let's see. What are we talking about today? So let's just get chat where we can see ya. I need to be able to see ya, chat. Eyes on chat today. So welcome, everybody. We're halfway through Mental Health Awareness Month, which is a huge month for us. We have a lot of cool stuff that we try to do. We work really, really hard to try to get it going. So, yeah, I see someone saying, Happy Friday. Someone else is saying, I don't know what ADHD is anymore. Yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about. So today, you know, it's so interesting because the more... So, like, we talk about ADHD. And when we talk about ADHD, people are like, oh, that's so interesting. And then, like people seem to be interested in it, right? Because the rate of ADHD diagnosis is increasing. And not just that, but we also see a lot of people who identify with having ADHD without necessarily a formal diagnosis of it. So something is going on. We'll talk a little bit about that. But yeah, so we're going to like dive into it further. We're going to look at a couple of different angles for ADHD. We're going to focus a little bit today on time blindness, socializing, and a couple of other interesting like aspects of it. So we're learning more and more about the neuroscience of it and what's actually going on. And it's fascinating. So we're going to be talking about ADHD, and hopefully we'll understand. I think I'm still understanding like what it is, like as a psychiatrist. You know, I think it's so interesting. I mean, we learned some basics, right? But like, it's so interesting how deep the research actually goes and how much we've learned about what's going on. I think we have a video coming out soon on ADHD in women specifically. So I think that's in post-production. But before we get into that, we got to do something else. So in May, we do a lot of cool stuff here at HG. So we got some different stuff going on. And what we try to do in May, in addition to making like good lectures and things like that, having interviews, which, you know, we've been streaming a lot more than we usually do. We also have a lot of cool community events. And the reason that we do this is because watching YouTube videos and or watching live streams on Twitch or whatever, like watching videos about improving your life doesn't necessarily improve your life. So that we have some very, very, very limited data, very poor quality. It's really just a signal that we detected kind of on the side. So basically what we found is that our coaching program was becoming less effective over time. So we like noticed that we had particular outcomes that were quite strong. And then like a year later, our outcomes seemed to be getting worse. And then we were super confused by that, worried by that. We looked into why our outcomes getting worse. So what we noticed is that the percentage of improvement was decreasing. And it turned out that the reason that the percentage of improvement was decreasing is because people were coming in healthier, right? So if I like measure my healthiness from 1 to 10, and my unhealthiness, like 1 is like I'm super unhealthy. So what used to happen in our pilot study was like people would come in at like a 4 and they would like move to a 7. And then about a year later, they would like come in at a 5 and they would move to a 7. So the delta went from like 3 to 2. And so we were a little bit worried that like, oh, does that mean that, you know, the quality of coaching is degrading? No, it just means that people are coming in healthier. And then we looked into that a little bit further. And it seemed like people who, watch a lot of our content seem to maybe be getting better. But we haven't really formally studied that in a prospective way. So that's not really a statement it's a hypothesis. It's not a statement of fact, if that makes sense. Anyway, so that being said, I know, so maybe we can help a little bit, right? And we certainly hear that feedback that, I watched this lecture and it was like really helpful. Great. That's why we do them. But I think what we really want y'all to do here at HG is like put your lives together, right? Don't just watch videos about putting your lives together, actually put your lives together. And we have a lot of cool stuff going on Discord right now. So I'm going to show y'all a couple cool things. We have a hackathon and we have a creative jam. So so y'all can join the Discord right now. And if y'all like actually want to do stuff, right? And I think Thor is a great example of someone who like prompts his community to do a lot of things. And it's really great. And we've been doing this kind of stuff for a couple years and we try to mix it up, right? So looking for group, this is great. So it's like you can log into your MMO and join the LFG group, and then you can do some kind of raid and you can get some piece of shiny loots that is a different color from the other loots. And the numbers on those shiny loots are larger than the numbers on the less shiny loots. And then you can celebrate after 8 hours of effort. Yay. Or what you can do is join our hackathon, looking for group, and like join a group of people, find projects that actually matter, to build something, practice, and it's awesome. Our community is great at this. So we also have a creative jam. So this is looking for teams. So these are people who share their, who they are and what they're good at. Designer, 3D modeling, rendering, and then you can also how to use this forum. So this is for, if you want to post about a project, you can go over to organizing team, let's make a card game, bartering activity for building local communities, app development. That's really interesting, right? So there's all kinds of stuff going on. So definitely check it out. I think a big part of what we try to do here is give you all a chance to apply what you learn and really operationalize it out. And I know we're going to be talking about ADHD today, but it's also interesting because one of the deficits in ADHD is the inability to self-organize very easily. And so oftentimes people with ADHD do better with external structure. And so if you're one of those people, definitely try to use the structure that we're trying to provide for y'all and try to actually build some stuff. So in the Creative Jam, we've got teams of 2 to 6 that make whatever y'all decide, right? So it can be like an infographic, animated skit, film, whatever. And then we're going to vote on submissions to help choose the winning piece. And then in the hackathon, we're going to create, y'all get to kind of decide whatever to create, but either tools to improve mental health, develop something like a game, app, or whatever else you want to. Submissions will be judged by some of our devs, and every member of the winning team gets access to the new trauma module, which, by the way, and this stuff is going to run until Monday, okay? So y'all can still get involved and build something over the weekend, which also, we have the trauma module coming out. So I don't know if y'all have seen Dr. K's Guide to Trauma. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. Can I actually... how can I see the trauma module? Okay, I can't. There we go. Right, so this is where we talk about a lot of things. There are a lot of concepts that I think were really, really important for our community, and we've sort of built that into a trauma module. It's something that we really built for y'all. So this is not like a module that's about, I mean, it can be useful for clinicians, but the way that we built, and this has been about 2 years in the works, by the way. And just so y'all understand, basically, I have a choice between writing a book and making a module. It's about the same amount of effort. And the goal behind the trauma module was like 2 things. First of all, when I look at our community and I see, and I read our subreddit a lot, I read what y'all say, I pay attention to chat. And so I'm kind of listening to what y'all struggle with. And then the question kind of becomes, the question becomes, how can we help you? And the challenge is that if you look at people asking for help in our community, it is a specific instance. I struggle with this. I struggle with dating. I'm 24 years old and I haven't graduated from university. I graduated from university and I don't have a job that I enjoy. I feel like switching careers, but it also feels like a waste. We see all of these individual problems. And so my challenge is like, okay, so we could like take this individual problem and solve it individually. But that is very difficult to do. It's, that's what we do in our coaching program, right? So it's like we help people work through things and we get really good outcomes there. But then the question is, there's solving the problem, which we can get really good outcomes in a short amount of time. But the other thing that we can also do is equip y'all with a basic understanding of yourself, your motivation, why it's difficult to make decisions, how to understand internal conflict. We can give y'all kind of like a playbook about yourselves. And if we give you a playbook about yourselves, it won't solve your individual problem, but it will give you a robust toolkit to better understand yourself and solve problems by yourself in the future. So that toolkit is a huge part of what went into the trauma module. The second thing that went into the trauma module is, in my work as a psychiatrist, I noticed that there is a lot of stuff that I think qualifies as fully psychotherapy, which is individual things, but that for a lot of my patients, I end up teaching. So part of psychotherapy is also something called psychoeducation, which is not exclusively in the therapy realm. So psychoeducation is very important. It's about teaching people how they work. So the trauma module is also like, okay, if I was a clinician and I did not have enough time, and I don't have enough time, to teach all of these things to my patients, and I could send each of my patients who have some history of trauma to a class. And I was like, go learn these particular things about trauma, then we can work together. That's what the trauma module is. So it's not by any means a replacement for therapy. It's not even something that is trying to be a replacement for therapy. What it really is an adjunct, right? So it's all the stuff that you can learn about the way that your body works, your physiology gets wired, the way that traumas manifest in the mind, what is the neuroscience of it, how does trauma lead to things like emotional numbness, and how you can like understand all those concepts so that you can utilize whatever healing modality you decide to use like more effectively. So that's really what it's about. We've been working on it for 2 years. So, and it comes out on Monday. And so, yeah, I see someone got the Audible book. Someone's saying that they got the book. Yeah. So the other thing is, if you guys want help with communication, I'd say definitely check out our book. It's like, it's designed for parents communicating with their kids. But the more that I realized so I was thinking about it, you know what I should have done is I should have written a book about kids communicating with your parents. That's what I should have done, right? How to talk to your parents. And then I see this a lot. Like I see a lot of, today's Relationship Fridays. So, the Reddit is extra fun today. And what I really think that like, if y'all learn like really not even communication 101, like the book teaches communication 101 and communication 201. It's like some high level communication techniques. It's a lot of what I do on stream. I saw that Charlie Hooper did a review of our interview with Sneeko. And like, if y'all want to learn how to talk like that, check out the book. Like we teach y'all the most basic, like if you're like playing Street Fighter, there's like, short punch, medium punch, and long punch. And then there's block and there's short kick, medium kick, and long kick. And it's like, that's what we're going to teach you. It's not some super EX whatever. It's like some of the basic nuts and bolts that actually gets you like 80% of where you need to go in communication. That's my honest to God opinion of it. And these communication skills are really, really good. So it really is. No, so like spacing, you guys are talking about spacing and all this kind of stuff. Like we're not even there yet, right? So like we got to understand this. Okay. So, and I guess we can hop right in. Okay. So this is like, now I guess we're getting to it, chat. Okay. So Neurodivergent people tend to move in packs like poorly emotionally regulated wolves. So if all of your friends have ADHD, I have some news for you. So this is somewhat true. But this is what I'm saying is like what we're working on is like we're playing Street Fighter, but we don't even know how to punch or kick. So like we're losing games. And the reason we're losing games is because we don't know the basics. So I want y'all to think about this, okay? If you want to be a good communicator, if you want to be a communicator that is in the top 20% of communication skills on the planet, maybe even top 10%, you need to do very little work. Now, this may sound confusing because you're saying, hold on a second, how can I get into the top 10% by doing very little work? And I want y'all to think about how much formal communication training have you received? How much formal communication training have your parents received? How much formal communication training have your friends received? How much formal communication has your pack of neurodivergent, emotionally dysregulated wolves friends received? So the reason that you can become such a good communicator so easily is because we don't formally study it at all, right? So like I want y'all to imagine that there's some tribe that existed somewhere on the planet like 10,000 years ago. And the concept of like focus training on archery or exercise or climbing or something like that, this idea of like focused and deliberate practice. See, most human beings just kind of do like what we feel like, right? Our brain does some like automatic learning for us. And then if our brain's automatic learning circuits are messed up, then we run into some problems. But very little formal training can go a very long way. And that's what we see, like when we have our parent program and even when we have our coach curriculum, right? So we'll take like people from the internet and we'll put them through some communication skills stuff. And like they become very good communicators very quickly. And like really like communication is one of the most important skills because it's like a buff for co-op, right? It's a buff for co-op. It allows you to play co-op better and better and better. It's like charisma, which in 5e is an OP stat. So definitely check that out if you guys are interested in being better communicators. But we're going to dive more into ADHD. Okay. All right, so let's dive in. Every ADHDer at some point, what if I don't really have ADHD? What if I just have a complex series of personal flaws that map onto ADHD, experiences that are incredibly relatable to other people with ADHD, and every failing in my life is entirely and unequivocally my fault? Okay, so this is a very common experience of people with ADHD, where they like look at their... Forget about ADHD for a second. This is a very common experience, right? And this experience happens for 3 reasons. The first is that when we have flaws and someone tells us, hey, this flaw is due to your ADHD, what our mind actually says is it responds with this. Every failing isn't the ADHD. It is entirely and unequivocally my fault, okay? So this is where like we don't like to blame our ADHD for our problems. This is number 1. So why don't we like to blame ADHD for our problems? It's very simple. Because our understanding of ourselves is not consistent with blame of an external thing. So our understanding of ourselves is consistent with blaming ourselves. So let's understand literally what happens. So we know, for example, that people with ADHD, I'll just pull up a quick paper, okay? So let's take a look at some research. In summary, ADHD increases the risk for depression, especially during adolescence and young adulthood. However, it is not well understood why ADHD increases the risk for depression at this stage. So this is true. This actually we figured out, okay? So this is a review paper that's looking at cognitive mechanisms underlying depressive disorders in ADHD, a systematic review. And this is sort of looking at how ADHD leads to depression. So if we look at this, let's understand a couple of things about depression. Actually, let's go back to this real quick. Okay, so let's look at this. So, I have a complex series of personal flaws that map onto ADHD, and every failing in my life is entirely and unequivocally my fault. So this is very common for people to think. And it turns out that the reason people think this way is not because it's true, but because we've been trained to conceptualize things in that way if we have ADHD. So I'll explain what I mean. So here's what happens. We have a ton of research on this. Give me a second, chat. So here's why people with ADHD don't think that they have ADHD. They think that they just have a set of very unique personal problems, and they don't like to blame their ADHD. Question is why? Why, chat? Let's understand. So here's what happens. Here's you as a kid. And humans are actually pretty good at estimating IQ. Maybe that statement is factually incorrect. I don't know. But generally speaking, like, kids can tell when like another kid is smart or another kid is dumb. This may change a little bit later once we start getting PhDs and we use big words. But generally speaking, like, you can tell when someone's stupid, right? And you can kind of tell when someone's smart. So kids go to school, and there's a group of kids. And we all sort of recognize that our IQ is in the same ballpark. Okay? Now, here you have a kid with ADHD, and you recognize that I'm about as smart as the other kids. Then what happens is you look at your performance. This kid gets an A, this kid gets a B, and I get an F. And there are lots of studies that show this. We go into a lot of the detailed research in Dr. K's Guide to ADHD and doing stuff. It's like super scary. So there's a study that looks at, if you look at kids with ADHD and depression, there's one study that found that if you get diagnosed with depression first, there is a 3% chance that you will get diagnosed with ADHD as an adult if you get diagnosed with depression as a kid. If you get diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, there is a 70% chance that you will have depression as an adult. This is from a comorbid population, okay? So that's important to keep in mind. So there's something wonky. It's not that, please don't take this as 70% of kids with ADHD grow up to have depression. I don't think that that is factually correct. The comorbidity is somewhere around 30%, right? So the majority of people have one or the other. But when you look at people who have both, the likelihood that the ADHD precedes the depression is way higher than the other way around. Now, I know that's a slightly complicated sentence, but we're trying to stay faithful to the research and the nuances, okay? So, now you're a kid. And what we know from ADHD is that when you are a kid with ADHD, oftentimes it is not diagnosed. So ADHD is both the most underdiagnosed and overdiagnosed mental illness, in my opinion, which means that we diagnose it a ton in people who don't have it, and we miss it a lot in people who do. So this is also incredibly common for girls. So if you're a girl with ADHD, the rate of diagnosis of girls to boys is 1 to 3. So 3 boys get diagnosed with ADHD for every 1 girl gets diagnosed. The interesting thing is that if you look at women to men, this is 1 to 1. So how do we understand this? 2 things. One is that girls usually have a frontal lobe that is developed 1 year ahead of their male counterparts. So one study showed that if you look at a boy who, a girl at the age of 10 will have like a frontal lobe that's about 11.5 years old versus a boy will have a frontal lobe that's about 10.5 years old. It's somewhere around 10 years. Okay, so what that means is that when someone is like looking at a boy versus a girl, the girl is like, their brains are like 1 year more mature. Another reason for that we misdiagnose girls, or we miss the diagnosis of ADHD in girls, is because the most common symptom that leads to diagnosis is hyperactivity, and girls are much less likely to be hyperactive. The third thing that changes is during puberty, we get an increased estrogen, alters our dopaminergic circuitry. And so we start to see a lot of like impulsivity and other kinds of like dopamine seeking activity happen more in women. So there's a puberty effect as well. Anyway, point here is that this kid doesn't get diagnosed. So when this kid doesn't get diagnosed, I want y'all to think about, imagine that you're a 7-year-old child and you recognize that you are just as smart as your friends, but you see that there is a huge performance difference. And then on top of that, what happens is your teachers, your parents, diagnose you with an effort problem. They said that you just need to try harder. I don't understand why you can't just study. Why can't you sit still? Why can't you go to bed on time? I've been calling you 15 times. You need to try harder. So now this is really confusing. So what really fucks people up is when you are doing, when you're doing everything right, and this may be like bold statement here, but so I think the single most damaging thing, and this is, I guess it's hyperbole, but honestly, it's the way I feel in this moment. Like the single most damaging thing I've seen as a psychiatrist is when someone is doing something completely correctly and you tell them that they are doing it completely wrong. So the single most damaging thing, what really screws people up for life, is when they get taught that up is down and down is up. So I'll give you all a simple example of this. So let's say I have abusive parents, and I am doing my best to make them happy, right? So I'm actually like being extra careful. I'm trying extra hard. I'm working extra hard. I don't want my parents to yell at me, but my parents are alcoholics. And so they're drunk and then they yell and then they blame me even when I don't do anything wrong. So the reason that this is so psychologically damaging is because your brain thinks that doing the right thing is the wrong thing. And then if you go through life thinking that the right thing is the wrong thing, it fucks up so many parts of your life. And we see this also, I see this in like romantic relationships, right, that are abusive, where there's like one partner who's like, you do everything wrong, but the person is like technically doing everything right. So when you get taught that right is wrong and that there is no way to achieve right, this creates learned helplessness. This creates a very confusing way to navigate life, because then the right answer no longer becomes right. It's like, you want to know how to fuck up people's ability to do finance and mathematics. You tell them 2 + 2 is 5. And they're like, no, I think it's 4. And you're like, no, 2 + 2 is 5. 2 + 2 is 5. There's this great scene from Star Trek TNG where Captain Picard is getting, oh shit, I wonder if I can find it. Can I show this, or do I get, oh man. Yeah, so this is a great episode. I don't know if you guys watch TNG, but one of the best lines in Trek has to be Picard yelling, "There are 4 lights." So this is like in this part of this episode. I mean, the spoiler alert, this show aired in the 80s. Okay. So like basically like in this episode, and this is what makes Captain Picard such a Chad. So there's like, he's being tortured. And like this is portrayed in Star Trek. Let's see if we can find the clip. This is being portrayed in Star Trek as Captain Picard. Look at that, dude. Let's go. Okay. So this is great.
Thus, as you will be for a long, long time. You do, however, have a choice. You can live out your life in misery, held
We're just
here,
gonna watch this because it's so
subject
Chad.
to my whims. Or you can live in comfort with good food and warm clothing, women as you desire them, allowed to pursue your studies of philosophy and history. I would enjoy debating with you. You have a
Y'all
keen
familiar with this
mind.
chat?
It's up to you. A life of ease, of reflection and intellectual challenge. Or this.
TNG's such a great show, dude.
What must I do?
Nothing, really. Tell me how many lights you see. How many? How many lines? This is your last chance. The guards are coming. Don't be a stubborn fool. How many?
You told me he would be ready to go.
We had some unfinished business.
Get him cleaned up. A ship is waiting to take him back to the
Cardassians.
Enterprise. Captain Picard. If you'll go with the guards, they'll take care of you.
If you guys haven't seen this, I know it's kind of weird.
There are 4 lines!
There's the lags. Okay, so I guess that doesn't really show the great context. So, all right, we're going to explain this a little bit, all right? So in this episode, Picard is getting tortured by the Cardassians. And so basically the guy's like, there's 4 lights and he's like trying to he tortures Picard until Picard says there are 5 lights. So he's like trying to get Picard to lie. So he's like trying to divorce this person's mind from reality. And what I think is hilarious and sad about this is in the show, Captain Picard is like very, very resolute, right? So he's like very strong internally so he can resist torture. And the problem with ADHD is it's the exact opposite. So Picard is like a 65-year-old, starship captain of the flagship of the Enterprise. I mean, the flagship of the Federation. But when you're like 6 with ADHD, you don't have the internal fortitude of a 65-year-old fictional character. Like, you just don't have that internal fortitude. So when the rest of the world tells you that you need to be working harder, it really messes you up. You begin to learn that 2 + 2 is 5. You begin to learn because everyone around you is telling you that you're screwing up and you need to put forth more effort. So what happens is, I want y'all to think about this, okay? So what ends up happening is when you're in this situation where you're getting Fs and your friends are getting As and Bs and everyone tells you need to be working harder, I want y'all to think about this. If my IQ is equal to other people plus a variable X equals F, and if someone else's IQ plus variable, or actually let's just do this. So actually, I'll do it this way. Right? So let's say that what you see in other people is you see that they have an IQ of 100 and they get an A. You have an IQ of 100 plus X, but you get an F. So what do you conclude here? You conclude that X must be some large negative number. And this is literally what happens, that we have studies on this. So then what happens is you begin to believe that you have some kind of deficit. There is something wrong with me. There is something fundamentally broken. And when there's something wrong with me and fundamentally broken, this belief is what contributes to the depression. So what happens is people with ADHD they have this learned belief of shame and that there's something, I am putting forth so much effort because my brain does not have the capacity to focus. And yet I'm pushing it, and I yield very little. Therefore, I must be fundamentally broken. This mathematical equation is what I see time and time and time again with ADHD. And now what happens is you carry this belief, even though it's not true. Now later on, you have this belief that you have a broken something that is always with you. And when you have a broken something, then what happens is you look at your life and you say, I am broken. There's something, every failing is my life, in my life is entirely and unequivocally my fault. This is what happens. So this is a consequence of ADHD. If you doubt your ADHD in this way, this is the consequence of ADHD. And why do you believe this? It's because when you were failing, no one said something else is wrong. right? The blame got placed on you. There's a lack of effort. You need to live up to your potential. If you just applied yourself, you'd do so much better. Where is the flaw? Where is the flaw? Where is the flaw? It's inside me. It's inside me. It's inside me. And what happens with these kids, it's super sad. Because at some point, the kid may try to talk to the parent and say, like, I know I'm smart, but they don't know how to articulate, like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Sometimes they'll say that, right? Actually, that's what they say, literally. They say, I don't know what's wrong with me. But there is something wrong with you. You've got ADHD, right? You're a neurodiverse individual trying to succeed in a neurotypical world. So there's even some evidence when we look at sort of the stress diathesis model of illness. What it presumes is that illness is the result of an environment plus like a genetic risk, right? So it's not even that something is objectively wrong with you. It is that there is an environmental component to the manifestation of disease. So you can look at someone who has a predisposition for alcohol use or alcohol dependence, and then you can give them stressful circumstances. You can give them trauma. You can even start them on an SSRI or antidepressant medication, which, by the way, increases your risk of alcohol dependence, which is super wild. All right, I don't know if you guys know that, but we can show that too. This is a really fascinating. Oh, no, sorry. SSRI, anti-alcohol dependence. Right? So 93 cases of alcohol dependence following SSRI treatment. Really interesting. So quick PSA there. And this is what happens in ADHD. So even the idea that, no, this is not ADHD, this is something that, what if I have a complex of personal flaws that map onto ADHD? You'll see how absurd that is. But this is the way that the mind thinks. And why does the mind think this way? Because it was taught to think that way. Because as a kid, you may have asked or wondered, I don't know what's wrong with me. And no one actually took that question seriously. No one sat down and did a differential diagnosis. No one stopped to think, what could be wrong with this kid? And instead, what we get told is effort. Live up to your potential. And we know this. There are studies that show, you know, we go into a lot of detail in Dr. K's guide, but we also have, I think, like a YouTube video about, let's see. We can go back to, I think we have one about ADHD and depression. Okay, that's interesting. That's so weird. I guess maybe this is promoted or something. 90,000 views 5 years ago. 800,000 views 2 years ago. It's so funny. Anyway, so yeah, so like this is what happens. So there's like this complex that develops in the mind of someone who has ADHD where they think, oh, like this isn't actually ADHD. Like there's just something like these are all my personal flaws and I have to own them a lot because that's what you were taught. You were taught to blame yourself. And chances are parents don't let you make excuses, right? So they're like, no, you can't make excuses. This is your fault. Now, there are a lot of good parents out there who do allow their children to make excuses. Those are the kids that get diagnosed. Those are the kids that don't wind up with depression, right? Remember that the comorbidity between ADHD and depression is somewhere around 30%, right? So still there's 70% of people out there who don't wind up with depression. And if you have some amount of luck, some amount of genetics, some amount of like whatever the cognitive mechanisms are, then that you know underlie the two. If you dodge that bullet, then you're in good shape. The last thing to consider about this like shame of ADHD is experiences that are incredibly relatable to other people with ADHD, right? So you've got like, oh, people say they have ADHD and I have it too. Like I experience the same thing, but I'm not willing to diagnose myself with ADHD, and you shouldn't diagnose yourself. You should go get a clinical evaluation. But, you know, this is exactly what it looks like. This is the manifestation of the shame. I mean, it's possible that you have a collection of things that perfectly overlap with ADHD, relate to other people's experiences with ADHD, and you still don't accept that you have it. I think that's completely like normal. I don't think it's correct, but it's a very, very common experience. And it's because of this shame complex. Okay. Questions before we move on. Yeah, so some people are saying getting on ADHD meds took away more than half of my depression almost immediately. So that's that can absolutely happen. So a lot of medication for ADHD is incredibly effective, and it is also is not a miracle for like a lot of people out there. So for some people, they see instant benefits. There's also a euphoria component to stimulant medication, which I think elevates people's mood. And yeah, someone else is saying short-acting Focalin messes me up more than taking nothing. Yeah, so like that's like really common, is that there's a highly variable effect, especially for women. So let me see if I can find this paper. Right. So just to give you all like a quick example. Hold on, I'm confused. There we go. So just to give you all, so this is female side of pharmacotherapy for ADHD, a systematic review. Several sex differences are demonstrated in the prescription, usage, and efficacy, effectiveness of both stimulant and non-stimulant ADHD pharmacotherapy. A single daily use of, this is probably methylphenidate, may possibly not be optimal for girls with ADHD, and atomoxetine may be a promising medication for girls and women with ADHD. So there's actually several studies that show that ADHD medication may not be quite as effective in women. And the reason for that is really simple, or not the reason, a reason for that is really simple, is I want y'all to think a little bit about how ADHD drugs are developed. So what is the symptom or sign, it's really a sign, that correlates the most with ADHD diagnosis it is hyperactivity. And so what do we really look for? What makes a parent or a teacher happy with a medicated child? It is the reduction of hyperactivity, right? So the kid fucking sits in their seat. The kid stays seated during dinner. The kid isn't running around all over the place. Thank God they're finally medicated for their ADHD. So when this is the main sign that we're looking to treat, and then we develop a stimulant medication, turns out stimulants are very good at dealing with hyperactivity. The problem is that hyperactivity is more common in boys than in girls. So the medication was developed specifically for, not specifically for hyperactivity, but that's a huge part of the efficacy of the medication, and it applies more to boys than girls. So the mileage for girls varies quite a bit. Really important. Okay. All right. So now we get to the fun. Oh, actually, let's take a look at questions. Any other questions? Okay, so what if I live in a country where it is almost impossible to get diagnosed with ADHD? I don't know, man. Like, so, or girl. Like, I think this is a challenge, right? So large parts of the world do not have access to good mental health treatment. Part of the reason that we do the work that we do, part of the reason that we even keep the prices the way that we keep them. I don't know if y'all are familiar with, like, pricing on the internet and courses by Harvard-trained whoever the fucks. But, part of what we're really proud of here at HG is that guides have been purchased, I think, in 121 countries. And so we have people from, like, sub-Saharan Africa and, like, Southeast Asia and these places that there aren't a whole lot of resources. So I'd say that the right move is always to try to see a clinician as best as you can, right? So if you're worried that you have a mental illness, like, that's the right answer. At the same time, that answer isn't available for everybody. And so we try to do what we can, not to say that it's a substitute, but there is some value to psychoeducation, learning about things yourself. The good news about ADHD is that basically like psychotherapy and like organizational training techniques, even executive functioning coaching. So there's lots of things that you can do that are about as efficacious as medication. So people with ADHD will compensate, and people who are good at compensating can essentially lead normal lives, presuming their ADHD is not very severe, right? And then like, it's super sad, but that's, the right answer is do the best that you can to get some clinical support. And just because there's an absence of clinical support doesn't mean that you can't get some improvement through non-clinical means. I would say that the physiologic analogy to this is, let's say someone has type 2 diabetes and I don't have any endocrinologists available. Just because I don't have endocrinologists available, and endocrinologists are the gold standard people that you should go to for management of type 2 diabetes, there's still things that you can do to improve your type 2 diabetes that are not the practice of medicine. So as you exercise, as you adjust your diet, there are things that you can do to improve your physical health. There are things that you can do to improve your mental health that don't necessarily involve psychotherapy or medication. So avail yourself of those kinds of things. Just procrastinate to compensate. Perfect. Let's move on. Okay. Now we get to fun stuff, chat. All right. Undiagnosed or unmedicated, unmanaged ADHD is saying, tomorrow will be the day I'll finally get up, do the stuff that needs to be done, and start living my life to its fullest. And you unironically believe it every time until you look up one day and realize you're 30. Tomorrow is the day I'll put my life together. Sometimes I'm late because I sit like this for a long time. So if we look at this, like, what on earth is going on? Where we just sit there, nothing is happening, we're not actually doing anything, and we get super confused. And then we're saying to ourselves, tomorrow will be the day I'll finally get up and do the stuff that needs to be done. So there are a couple of concepts from ADHD that become incredibly important to understand why this happens. So one is the way that the ADHD brain relates to time. And the second is the working memory of the ADHD brain. So Russell Barkley is an expert in ADHD pathology. And he has this super cool paper, and he has a great concept for ADHD. Let me find it. Yes. Hold on. Not that paper. Here it is. So Barkley's take on ADHD is that there are... Can you guys see this? Okay, I'm going to have to move it around a little bit. Is there some way to... Okay. So Barkley's take on ADHD is that there are certain core deficits which then result in like other downstream deficits. So for example, let me think about what's like a good example of like a core deficit resulting in a downstream deficit. So let's say like, let's say I lag, right? Let's say I'm playing on ping. So if I have a slow or crappy internet connection, that will lead to other downstream deficits. So that'll lead to me like losing games. That'll lead to me like being able to do my homework more slowly. That'll lead to me like, you know, having a scuffed download for whatever lecture I need to watch in school. So like the problem of ping will also lead to more disconnects and more losses that way. So if I play on ping, I have a lower rank in a video game. But generally speaking, we correlate rank in a video game with skill. But I'm not less skilled. There is another factor that is leading to a downstream consequence. And there are lots of downstream consequences to having a crappy internet connection. So in the same way, in ADHD, there are a couple of fundamental problems. And then these fundamental problems intersect with each other and then create further problems. And it's usually the stuff up here that we really see. So for example, women with ADHD have a 60% chance of being divorced, I think. That also is a weird, I'm citing the statistic in a weird way. So one study looked at male and female partners with ADHD. So man has ADHD, what is the likelihood of divorce? Woman has ADHD, what is the likelihood of divorce? And for women are divorce 10% of their husbands because of ADHD. Men will divorce 60% of their wives because of something related to ADHD. Because is a strong word. It's not that causal, but it's a shocking statistic. So the point here is that if we look at like the downstream outcome of divorce or single parenting, there is an upstream, there's something going on in the brain that results in this downstream consequence. Okay? And if you guys are skeptical and want to get into the actual data, we can do that. So this was a theory that I think was really propagated by Berkeley. And what he noticed is that there are three basic things: disinhibited prepotent responses, perseveration of ongoing responses, and poor interference control. And these result in all kinds of problems. And what we're going to talk about today is poor nonverbal memory. So basically in ADHD, inability to hold events in the mind, unable to manipulate or act on the events, impaired imitation of complex sequences, defective hindsight, defective forethought, poor anticipatory set, limited self-awareness, diminished sense of time, deficient nonverbal rule-governed behavior, and delayed cross-temporal organization. So this also results in poor... Okay, we'll talk about verbal memory in a second. So let's talk a little bit about verbal and nonverbal memory deficits in ADHD, because this is something that is responsible for a lot of problems. Okay? So we have something called nonverbal working memory. And in ADHD, this is impaired. This is a huge, huge, huge debuff, right? So during character creation, when you're trying to figure out what traits to get and what is worth a lot of points, like, you know how you can take a negative trait for like an extra 8 points to distribute? Some of the things, as y'all know, if you play like a solid, computer RPG, is that some of the traits are worth it, easy points that you can pick up, and other traits are like crippling for your character. A nonverbal working memory deficit is one of the things that is crippling for your character. Doesn't mean that things are hopeless, right? I'm laughing about it. It can be fixed. It can be worked on, etc. But let's understand what nonverbal working memory is. So nonverbal working memory is essentially our RAM. Okay? So we have a neurotypical brain may have this much RAM. So when I have a lot of RAM, I can do a lot of I can hold a lot in my mind. Whereas someone with ADHD has this much RAM. So what this means is that if I want to, for example, get an apartment, first I have to, first thing I need to do is fill out applications. Then I need to maybe do some research. I need to look at my finances. I need to Google search neighborhoods. I need to think about furniture. I need to cancel my lease. See, there's lots of different steps. And in order for me to get an apartment and move out of the house, my brain needs to be able to organize and hold all of these steps in my mind. Now, the problem with ADHD is that I have this much space, and maybe a little bit of space for two. So this results in all kinds of interesting things. This is my favorite. This results in this. ADHDers trying their best to not interrupt and let you finish your sentence despite grasping your point in the first few seconds. So this is a hilarious meme. We'll talk about this meme in and of itself because there's some cool stuff around communication and relationships and ADHD. But the reason that this meme is true is because when someone else speaks, this is their working memory. They have concept number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The problem is with ADHD, you cut them off here. You can't pay attention to the rest of what they say. There's no space for it. And then if you wait till the end of their long-ass diatribe, then you forgot what they were going to say here. You forgot this, and then you're just left with this one, and then you stop paying attention to these, and you forgot what was going on over here. So this is a deficit of working memory. The other problem with working memory is that it results in problems with time. So clinical implications of the perception of time and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Is this the... Right? So this is a study that's looking at children who have difficulties in time perception. Let's look at this. So practical approaches to time perception and evaluation have shown that individuals with ADHD have difficulties in time estimation and discrimination activities, as well as having the feeling that time is passing by without them being able to complete tasks accurately and well. So if we look at like a big problem that people with ADHD have, if we look at these two memes and we're like, what is going on here? Okay. What we find is that a lot of this has to do with working memory and time perception. And literally what you can do is you can do a study of kids with ADHD. And here's an example of how time perception is scuffed. So you can tell someone with ADHD, I want you to fold this paper airplane. And then I want you to wait 15 minutes, and then I want you to fold a second paper airplane. So people with ADHD, their ability to measure that 15-minute increment is impaired. So a neurotypical person has a sense of how much time passes. And this is why people with ADHD have so much difficulty with doing shit. So I don't know if this makes sense to y'all, but in order to do things, you need to have a perception of time. Like your brain needs to be able to calculate time, right? Like you need to, like, it's really hard to do stuff if you are not aware of the dimension of time. I don't know how else to say it. Like you think about all the tasks that we do involve a time dimension. Like I have to study for a test. Okay, how many hours between now and the test? How many hours does it take to sleep? How many free hours do I have? How many hours do I have to game? How many hours does it take to study one chapter? All of these things, the dimension of time is messed up. And so if the dimension of time is messed up, this is what results in an executive function deficit. So let's go back to Barkley's paper. Okay. So this diminished sense of time results in this. Impaired execution of goal-directed responses, diminished goal-directed persistence, behavioral inflexibility, less task engagement following disruption, poor control of behavior by internally represented information. Some of those things come from these other things. But like, it's very difficult. Like if you don't have hindsight, if you have defective hindsight, if we look at this meme, what does this mean? This is defective hindsight. Right? Oh, tomorrow will be the day that I do it. Tomorrow rolls around. And then what do you say tomorrow? You'll say, when tomorrow rolls around, you'll say tomorrow. Tomorrow will be the day. And then tomorrow becomes today. And then you say tomorrow will be the day. 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 How can you wake up and realize you're 30 one day? What the fuck? It is because there is a problem with the perception of time. And as long as there is a problem with the perception of time, all of the things that relate to time, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, persistent focus, follow through, executing 9 steps to move out of your apartment. If the dimension of time is messed up, all of these things become impaired. This is what we've discovered. Now, part of the reason that we struggle with this is because of our working memory. So working memory is the capacity for our brain to hold stuff. So like you guys know, like when you play World of Warcraft or any other like loot-based RPG, we have backpacks. We have inventory space. And the more inventory space you have, the more you can hold. And y'all know that the worst thing in an RPG is to have very little inventory space. Like if you've got 6 slots in your inventory, it's fucking annoying. You can't do anything. You're constantly TPing back to town to offload whatever stuff because you can't be out there in the world actually grinding towards anything. This is what a small amount of working memory is like. You can only hold a very little amount of stuff in your head at a time. So this is why people can actually do things like perseveratively focus, right? So if we kind of go back to Barclay's paper, we'll see this, right? So if we kind of go over here, there's perseveration of ongoing responses, which means your mind stays focused on one thing for a long period of time. Yeah, that's because like when you have very little RAM, if there's one thing inside the RAM, that's okay. The deficit is not in holding one thing. So if I'm playing a video game, that's all I'm thinking about. I'm not, and the video game operationalizes things for me. I don't need to think about what comes next and what comes next and what comes next. See, if I'm trying to study for a test, I have to think about when am I going to eat? When am I going to go to the library? What's going to happen then? How long am I going to be there? When am I going to meet up with my friends? When do I need to go pick up food for dinner? You have to think about all these things. But in a video game, you don't think about, okay, like what's going to happen 6 hours after I queue for this game. You don't think about that because the game creates a time boundary for you. And this is why people who have working memory deficits have difficulties with time, get addicted to video games, because the game does, it's a bite-sized chunk that your brain can handle. And this is exactly the problem, right? This is why we get addicted, because then what happens is like, I don't think about the next hour. I can't think about the next hour. I have time blindness. So I don't think about the next hour. I have a deficit in hindsight. So I forget about the previous hour. And so 8 hours go by, 8 years go by. One day I wake up and I'm 30. And I say, tomorrow I'll do everything that needs to be done. Part of this perception of time being messed up means that when you say, I'll do everything that needs to be done, there are studies that show that, once again, kids with ADHD have a poor perception of understanding how long it takes to get something done, even without ADHD. Forget about the fact that you can't focus. That's an additional layer, right? So it takes you twice as long. But it is the capacity to estimate the amount of time it takes that is impaired. Now think about this. If you can't estimate properly how long something takes, what does that mean? Right? So I want y'all to let's use this analogy of money instead of time. So imagine I went to the grocery store and I was blinded to all the prices. You all been to these fucking restaurants that they don't show the price on the menu? It's like, what the fuck? You're like looking at this menu, there's a lot of shit on there. Everything's got truffle oil. And it's like, what's the price? Like, I don't know. It's a surprise. How much money do I need to spend on this meal? No one has a clue. You'll find out at the end. How much money you spent is something you'll figure out at the very end. This is what it's like to live with ADHD and time blindness. It's like you're looking at a menu, you have no fucking idea how long everything takes. Okay, what do you need to do today? I need to go to the grocery store and I need to send one email. How long will that take? I don't know. An hour and 5 minutes? Incorrect. Nothing's on the menu. You don't get to see the price. It takes 16 hours. You didn't even send the email. You just got to the grocery store and you forgot something. So you have to go back tomorrow. This is what the experience of being with ADHD is like. Right? And we have data to support this. This isn't just me saying, oh, like ADHD is like, it's terrible. So like, look at this this is crazy, dude. Right? This is like time perception and ADHD, a meta-analysis. Okay? Right? So time perception has been characterized as the ability to predict, anticipate, and respond efficiently to upcoming information. This is fucking impaired. Like, think about this for a second, okay? Right? So temporal abilities encompass perception of timing, motor timing, and imagination of timing. Imagination of timing. Being able to predict how long something will take. So like, for instance, impulsivity is correlated with a reduction in tolerance to delays, poor temporal foresight, right? Like, I didn't think about the consequences of opening up my phone. And steeper delay discounting. Oh, this one's devastating. This one is like, it'll be easier tomorrow. Okay? So there are a lot of studies of, time perception in adult ADHD, like, And there, by the way, there's some mixed data here, okay? So I think this paper is from, where is this paper? This paper was published in 2022. So in this meta-analysis, it's important to point this out, actually. I want to show you all something from this. Whereas some studies were able to demonstrate a distinct deficit in time estimation. That's the most consistent thing that we see in ADHD. Time reproduction and time management, other studies were unable to demonstrate a clear association between ADHD and time estimation and time reproduction deficits. So that there's some aspects of time temporal stuff that may be more or less impaired in ADHD, right? So it's not like everything is, you're not screwed for life. Now, a lot of people are going to be asking, okay, what do I do about this? So I think there's a couple of important things. The first is to let go of the shame, right? So instead of like thinking that you're fundamentally busted, recognize that there is a deficit. And can you own that deficit? Absolutely. The good news is that there are compensations for deficits. So if you look at like, executive function coaching, or you look at like CBT for ADHD, or ADHD-related psychotherapy, what you find is, first of all, this is just as effective as medication. So generally speaking, the effect size of psychotherapy modalities for ADHD are as effective as medication. And what a lot of these modalities are building in tools that compensate for your deficits. So using stuff as simple as a calendar and timers. So what you'll find is there are a lot of people in our community who have ADHD who will use things like Pomodoro technique and all this kind of stuff. So the cool thing is that you can use external tools. And this is where people who struggle with ADHD, oftentimes if they have enough sufficient external structure, right? So if you have the right prompting, then this kind of stuff becomes less of a problem. So the capacity for perseveration is only a problem when the perseveration is not in the right direction. And generally speaking, the basic problem is that frequently we can't control it. But I've worked a lot with people who have ADHD, arguably have some kind of subclinical ADHD myself. ADHD runs in my family, especially on my mom's side. So and the key thing is that if you can focus, if you can create an external scaffolding for the mind, then ADHD is less problematic. And this is literally what these cognitive behavioral therapy approaches are to ADHD. There's also other kinds of things that we can do. So this is a consequence of not just the time blindness, but things like immature self-regulation or the ability to regulate our internal emotional state is poor, right? So poor self-regulation of arousal in the service of goal-directed action. I can't get myself to do anything. So self-regulation of arousal, the ability to arouse yourself and move towards goals, is a motivational problem, is an emotional problem in ADHD. All of those things can be worked on. So this is part of the reason that we do so much around alexithymia and emotional regulation, like right in the feels, which we've done before here at HG. So there's all kinds of stuff that you can do. It's not hopeless. So basically, like, if y'all are struggling with time blindness and a poor working memory, what we know is that meditation probably improves your nonverbal working memory. We know that using tools like calendars, and this is like Dr. K saying, meditate, use a calendar, and use a timer. And that's kind of the right answer, right? There's more detail to it. We'll kind of look into that. I'll think about if there are particular cognitive techniques that are very, very helpful. But I think the first cognitive technique that's incredibly helpful is noticing the shame and noticing that many of the conclusions that you form. So here's a really common thing that I see is that someone looks at their life with ADHD and says, my life is so hard. Things are so difficult. And they look at something like an alarm and a calendar, and they say, this is a small intervention. There is no way that a small intervention can make up for the size of difficulty that I experience. But even that analysis is filtered through a shameful mind. This is filtered through a mind that amplifies, because of the depressive characteristic of ADHD, amplifies the size of your problems because it feels insurmountable. right? So if I'm sitting in a bathtub and I have a spoon and I'm like, holy shit, there's so much water in this bathtub, and I'm spooning one spoon out at a time, carrying it to the sink and pouring it into the sink. And I think, oh my God, this is so much work. And someone tells you, hey, I have this crazy idea. There is one thing you can do that'll make the water drain on its own. You just have to unplug the drain in the bathtub itself. You don't need to spoon it 1,000 times. This is what working with ADHD is like. Where there are a couple of people who will figure out a couple of things that really click for them. And then you start to see movement in the positive direction. So, first of all, be careful about the conclusions that your mind comes up with, especially if your mind is not in the healthiest of places. So the more behind you are, the more things are worse for you, the more likely shame and depression are filtering your thoughts, which means that it will misestimate the value of things that you can do. The other problem that I see a lot in ADHD is when you start to do a good job at stuff, your difficulty with hindsight and difficulty with foresight mean that you don't understand, your brain doesn't process that even a 5% improvement every week will result in like a complete improvement in 20 weeks. But your brain can't see that because of the time blindness. So this is what I really see in ADHD, is that there are so many things that handicap your ability to improve that are not the deficits themselves. They're the consequences of the deficits. The deficiencies in hindsight mean that when you do something good, you may not notice it. And we see this as well, that you don't learn from your mistakes, right? That's what this whole meme is about. In ADHD, you don't learn from your mistakes. You just sit there, do nothing for a little while. Why don't you learn from your mistakes? It's not just that you don't learn from your mistakes. The real devastating thing is that you don't learn from your successes. That's the real devastating thing. So even though you're doing things right, and if you look at your life, chances are you're doing some stuff right. It's harder, but you have actually probably a lot of wins in your history. Right? This is what's devastating, is the capacity for the mind to see. And once again, why is that? Because the RAM is very small. So you can only look at one thing at a time. Right? This is why the attention shifts so much, because you can't hold multiple things in your mind at the same time. So you have to move from one thing to another. And then if you stop moving, then you're only focused on one thing. This deficit of nonverbal memory. Now, there's another really interesting thing which we can talk about. Okay, so we'll talk about this. Okay. Next thing that we're going to talk about is the mood meter. High energy and low energy, and unpleasant and pleasant. So when we're high energy and we're pleasant, let's fucking go, son. And somewhere right before that high is we're back. Yay, we're feeling it. I don't know exactly what this means. And then we're vibing over here. And then this is great. When we're kind of neutral, it is what it is. And then we get to it's so over. And this is so beautiful. Mom would be sad, right? So the opposite, the worst place we can be in ADHD is people will be disappointed in us. This is what really hurts. This is the nature of our lowest of the low. It is not even disappointment in ourselves. It is disappointment in ourselves because we are disappointing to other people. Now, why does this happen? Why are we like this? So there are a couple of different things to keep in mind, okay? The first is that in ADHD, our arousal levels, remember we have a deficit. Right? So we have a deficit in poor self-regulation of arousal. So this is the first thing. So our ability to control this axis is poor. So there are times where we are high energy and low energy. And what we know from neurotypical people is their ability to get into the mood. They're better at that than people with ADHD. So there is an arousal control deficit. It isn't that you become less or more aroused. It's your ability to control the arousal that's a problem. Second thing that we see is unpleasant and pleasant. Right? So let's talk about affect. So the other thing that we know is that in ADHD, we have affective dysregulation. Okay? Let's see if we can find... Yeah, so limited self-regulation of affect. So what this means is that my ability to regulate my emotional state is impaired. So there's even people have hypothesized, you know, we have things like ADD, attention deficit disorder. Then we have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And then we have ADD-ED, which is attention deficit disorder, emotional dysregulation subtype. So some people have hypothesized that there's even a third type of ADD, where if you look at our frontal lobes, so this is usually what's deficient in ADHD. So we have a frontal lobe deficit. And the frontal lobes are what regulate our negative emotional circuitry. So when our frontal lobes are deficient, we cannot stop our brain from feeling intense periods of anger, sadness. We can't regulate our negative emotions. Okay? So now what we have is we have an arousal control deficit and we have an emotional regulation deficit, which means that while this is a great representation of what it's like, the problem is that we don't get to control where we are, right? So we basically, it's like we're going to play darts and we're going to play darts blindfolded. On any given day, we may wind up in one of these squares. So the ability to take sustained action over time becomes very difficult, right? So poor self-regulation of arousal in the service of goal-directed action, and this results in behavioral inflexibility. We can't stop doing what we're doing. Diminished goal-directed persistence. Why? Because on today, fuck it, we ball. Tomorrow, we're vibing. The next day, it is what it is. The next day, mom would be sad. And the next day, let's fucking go. And then the next day, it's so over. So there's like our productivity and mood is like a scatter plot. Now, you guys may say, okay, Dr. K, does this mean we're screwed? No. Now we're going to give you all a cool answer. Now we talk about poor verbal working memory. So there's one really cool thing that you can do. So people with ADHD have poor verbal working memory. What does this mean? So let's look at poor verbal. So reduced description and reflection. Poor self-questioning. Okay, hold on, let me do this. Give me a second, chat. Self-questioning. Also terrible handwriting. Poor problem solving. Okay. Even some of these things like delayed moral reasoning. I don't know what that means, honestly, but I'm going to write it down. Okay, you guys can't even, well, this is just all. I'm going to just write this again. This is too much. This is terrible, chat. What the fuck? Okay. Reduced description. And reflection. Okay. Poor self-questioning and poor problem solving. Now, if you are looking at these problems, okay, deficient rule-governed behavior, let's talk about that. So, if you are looking at this and you are saying, okay, this sounds crippling. This sounds like we're screwed, okay? Because we have all these problems like, oh my God, I can't problem solve. I can't question myself. I can't learn about myself, iterate on myself. I cannot make a rule and follow it. And there's even some weird delayed moral reasoning. I don't know what that means, to be honest. So you may look at this and you say like, okay, hold on a second, Dr. K. This means that I can't make rules and follow them. I can't question myself and therefore figure out what's wrong and improve it. My ability to problem solve is impaired. This is what's really important to understand. If you think you're screwed, you're not screwed. Why? Because these are deficits of verbal working memory. You may say, what is that? What's the significance of that? That means that if you improve your verbal working memory, all of these things will improve. The problem with ADHD is we find that, okay, I make a rule for myself and I'm not able to follow it. I'm not able to learn from my mistakes. I'm not able to even understand what I'm feeling, and I don't know how to control my emotions. There's something super cool about this, which is that if we use our verbal capacity, all of these things can actually improve. This makes no sense, but it's true. So I'll explain this. Okay, so this is where we get to trauma. So what we know about trauma is when a human being forms a narrative, when they are able to articulate something about their life, whatever capacity that is, improves. Okay, so in trauma, we have this phenomenon called hemispheric lateralization, which means that the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere don't talk to each other. They're not able to communicate. So if you ask someone who has ADHD, has a history of trauma, or is alexithymic, what are you feeling? How does that make you feel? They'll say, I don't know, bad or frustrated, stressed. These are the only 4 words that their brain has access to. Because the part of their brain, the left hemisphere, that comes up with language is not connected to the right hemisphere. I mean, it's not like the corpus callosum is severed. That has happened medically before, but that's not trauma. What we're talking about is there's decreased activity across the parts of these brains that talk to each other. So I'm unable to articulate my emotions because literally the verbal center of my brain doesn't have access to the emotional center of my brain. What we know from studies on trauma is that when I am able to articulate that emotion, there is an increased connectivity between these 2 parts of the brain. And in the struggle for finding language, my left brain will reach across and form connections with my right brain. The beautiful thing is the moment that happens, that highway has been built. And then it can be used for other things like emotional regulation. So awareness of what you are feeling is the same as regulating what you're feeling. Articulating what you're feeling is the same as regulating what you're feeling. This is why psychotherapy as a modality is so powerful. A lot of people get confused and they say, I don't understand what the point is. How does talking about my problems help? It doesn't actually fix my problems. Incorrect. Incorrect scientifically. Because what we know from studies of trauma is that when you are able to articulate your problems, there's other stuff going on in the brain that has to happen before you can articulate your problem. You have to organize the information. You have to manipulate the information. You have to be able to access the information, which is suppressed. And once all of these things happen, stuff improves. And this is, second example of this, is what we know is that when someone articulates and makes narrative out of their trauma, Not only does the negative impact of the trauma diminish, the trauma becomes a source of growth. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So what is the difference between someone who is crippled with PTSD and someone who has post-traumatic growth? The difference is literally the ability to make narrative. And narrative cannot be made without your verbal working memory. And so in the process of trauma healing, what we do is we take someone who is dissociating, disconnected from their emotions. I ask them, what's been going on in your life? And they say, I don't know. I'm not even a real person. I feel like I'm a husk. I've been existing. I haven't been living. This is the version that they come in when they're in this is the version that shows up in my office. A year and a half later, after doing verbal working memory work, articulating what their experiences is, articulating what their emotions are, they start to form a narrative identity. Once they have a narrative identity, they become a trauma survivor. Then when something bad happens in their life, when they get diagnosed with cancer, the trauma survivor in them boosts them. We have tons of studies on post-traumatic growth and the development of narrative. The key thing to understand is that all of this relates to being able to put things into language. Freud also discovered this. Freud said something really interesting, which was that language can serve as a substitute for action. We kind of know this, right? Because there are people who talk really big and never fucking do anything, because it's one or the other. Those who can't do, teach. Ha, here I am. We sort of know this instinctively. But what this means for you is that people with ADHD feel crippled. That I make rules for myself and I don't fucking follow them. Okay? I cannot figure out what is wrong with me. I don't even know what's going on with me. If you ask me to describe what my problems are, I don't even know where to start. Everything is going wrong. These are consequences. I want you all to understand this, that the brain does not know how to articulate what is wrong. The brain doesn't know how to articulate what I feel. And the cool thing about this is that all we have to do to fix these problems, right, including things like less task re-engagement following disruption, poor control of behavior by internally represented information. This is really important. I want y'all to think about this. Poor control of behavior by internally represented information. Let me ask y'all something. If you have ADHD, why do you do this? You will say, I don't know. You cannot articulate it. And this is the really wild thing that we've learned about science, is unless you can articulate what is going on inside you, you can't control it. This is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Naming a problem takes its power away. Understanding what it is takes its power away. You cannot name something. You cannot understand what's going on, right? So even if we look at the process of diagnosis. So if I ask you, why did I lose this game? I played so well. I don't understand what I could have done. We fucking see this shit all the time on the internet. And then someone who is like way higher than you in rank, it says, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem. Articulation of a problem and analysis of a problem go hand in hand. Improving your verbal proficiency will improve all of these things, because then your brain knows what's going on. And like I mentioned in the trauma thing, this is what's really wild that a lot of people don't understand, is that when you articulate something, you are forming a connection, and willpower can take that highway too. It's not really how it works, but effectively it's kind of like that. So all you need to, not all, a major thing that people with ADHD do is they look at this and they're like, how do I change this behavior? How do I fix this? You don't fix this. Or you can fix this, sure. You can take stimulants. The other thing that you can do is articulate what is going on. Look at Bart. What the fuck is going on in here? He has no idea. This is a cartoon and you can tell he's got no clue. It's such a great representation. So what we really need to do is articulate, articulate, articulate. The process of articulation involves so many different things going on in the brain. And the more that we articulate, the better we will be. So focusing on your verbal working memory deficits can be very important in ADHD. And just name things, just name them. And then you'll say, how do I do that? Great question. Right? So this is where try to use as many words as you can. So a great place to start is just the feelings wheel. So when you're sitting like this on a given day, how many emotions do you experience? Just articulate the emotions that you experience. Really useful. So we can start leveling up this working memory. And then we get to other questions like, what makes this hard for you to do today? What makes it hard for you to do right now? So as you ask yourself these questions, this kind of goes back to this. Poor self-questioning and problem solving. I want y'all to appreciate how there's a slash here. Problem solving and self-questioning go hand in hand. So here we are focusing on the problem solving. We're not focusing on our inability to articulate what is going on, or even our inability to ask ourselves questions. And this is why people are so crippled, because we're trying to solve this downstream thing instead of solving the upstream cause. And as you improve nonverbal memory, working memory, and verbal working memory, things will get a lot better. And what we see is this is what we do clinically. Right? So we've sort of figured this out on a clinical sense, like what works is getting people to articulate their problems. And something about articulation of the problem helps people solve it. And that's because when you articulate it, your frontal lobes have to do some work in order to articulate it. And then it's laid out for your frontal lobes, and it becomes easier to execute on. Okay. Let's take a look at some questions. And we have maybe time for one more. Man, these are so good questions. Okay, maybe we'll just do questions the rest of the time. All right, hold on. Through these practices, I can cause neuroplasticity and cure myself of ADHD. So I don't know if ADHD can be cured. So we're very hesitant with that word in psychiatry, because what we know is that ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disease, which means that it is a consequence of the way that our brain develops. Now, there are a small number of people, probably somewhere at most 30%, who will quote unquote grow out of ADHD. So since it is neurodevelopmental, some studies will cite higher. My guess is it's around 30%. That as your frontal lobes mature, some of these deficits in frontal lobe problem, because frontal lobe maturity happens until you're about 30. I suspect it's even later now, because I think we're changing the rate at which our brain matures. So until you're like 30 to 32, your brain will naturally level up with relation to ADHD. There are a couple of challenges with this. The first is that sometimes the consequences of undertreated, undiagnosed, or untreated ADHD can impair us quite a bit. So there's growing up with undiagnosed ADHD, that causes certain psychological problems, which then have to be fixed. So it's not just, even if your brain is maturing, some of the shame that you live with, you can't mature yourself out of the shame. The growth of your neurons in your frontal lobe, neurons don't grow. The pruning of your neurons in your frontal lobe and the strengthening of your frontal lobe and other parts of the brain, that is a natural biological developmental process. But the psychological trauma of growing up with ADHD is not something that the frontal lobe just matures out of. So oftentimes that needs to be addressed. There are lots of practices that induce neuroplasticity. Things like meditation is a good example. That's all very helpful. But I would say the most effective thing that people do is a combination of some neuroplasticity, some combination of healing the damage of ADHD, some combination of growing your brain, And this is the most important thing, developing compensatory mechanisms. So in the same way that we have a prosthetic leg for someone who is missing a leg, we can develop a prosthetic brain. And that is what people with ADHD need. A prosthetic brain is an external instrument that does some of the work for our frontal lobes. Great examples of a prosthetic brain are a calendar, an alarm. So what are the deficits that we need to address? We need to address time blindness, right? So that's one of the deficits. So we need some kind of system to track time. So I'll even use I'll even track stuff in Excel as it relates to time. I'm fucking obsessed with time. I'll show y'all real quick. So I do this myself. I don't know if you guys can see this. So this is just me keeping track of stuff. Like, I know it's weird. I know it doesn't make any sense. We're not going to talk about what this is, but like this is like on April 1st, and then I track what I do in some way. This is on the back of the door of my office. So I use external tools to function as a prosthetic brain. And the three most important external tools are things around time blindness. So keeping track of stuff using alarms and calendars. The second external tool that I would recommend that y'all use, I mean, I did this a while ago, but now I've developed a compensatory mechanism. I don't need it quite as much, is something like a feelings wheel. So when you're sitting there like this, give me a second. Like to look at a feelings wheel and then just ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? You will be amazed at how much you learn about yourself. Okay? And then the third thing that you can do that's really important as a prosthetic brain is manage your sensory input. So the brain has difficulty oscillating your attention or holding your attention where it needs to be. And what is it that causes our attention to waver? Sensory input. We have this part of our brain called the thalamus, which is basically constantly integrating input from our sensory organs. And so what we really want to do is be very careful about our sensory input. So as you control the environment that you live in by reducing your notifications, this is all stuff that people know. Even moving to a separate area to do a certain kind of work, right? So like sometimes when I'm like trying to do a certain kind of work, like I won't sit here. I'll sit behind me. I'll sit on that couch when I'm doing specifically reading. Because if I try to read here, I'll fucking alt-tab. So it's a mess. And so the more that you can build yourself a prosthetic brain, the less of an impact ADHD will have. And like CBT for ADHD is like half of it is building a prosthetic brain. It's like developing all these compensatory mechanisms so that your brain can function the way that it's supposed to. Okay? Great question. Okay. Any hints as to whether you then actually have ADHD or just relating other than a diagnosis? Because I do relate and have a massive procrastination problem, but it's not like I'm trying and somehow failing. I actually am extremely lazy. In school, my intelligence brought me through, but in uni, my inability to study has been detrimental to me. Okay. So the other thing that we're seeing a lot is that everyone thinks that they've got ADHD nowadays. So why is this, right? Why is everyone... So if you look at, I think, the actual prevalence of ADHD, I think it's under 10%. Let me double check the statistics real quick. So let's see what the prevalence of epidemiology of ADHD. Let's see. So the prevalence of ADHD varies from 2 to 18%. Okay, the prevalence in school-aged children is estimated to be between 9 and 15%. In a meta-analysis of 175 studies, the estimated pooled prevalence of ADHD was 7.2%. Okay? So, 7% of people have ADHD. If you look at the internet today, it's like 70% of people have ADHD. Why? And you relate to this. You have a massive procrastination problem. You call yourself extremely lazy. Why? What's going on? So I think there are two things going on. The first is that I think we are catching a lot more ADHD diagnosis. So we're seeing that a lot of people who were misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed, we're now catching them because there's greater awareness of ADHD. So some of these studies show a prevalence of about 15%, maybe even 20%. Second thing that's going on is that, so ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder, which means that it is something about the way that our brain develops. Now let's understand what affects brain development. Brain development is 100% affected. Not to say that it isn't, that's the only thing that affects, but we absolutely know that brain development is affected by environment. Right? So if a child is not exposed to language by the age of 5, if they're like never, no one ever talks to them, like they may never learn to speak. We have a lot of really interesting stuff that came out of these Romanian orphanage studies. So we know that the brain requires exposure for development. Now, what's happening to the exposure of our kids nowadays? What are we doing to our brains? You guys know? Let me find this. Right? So like this is like super creepy. But let's take a look at this. I don't know if you guys saw this video. This scared me so much. Right? This is like, and it's got creepy music, I guess. I don't know if we need the music. That's kind of atrocious. Right? So this kid is like nightmare scrolling. So what we're seeing is that we're exposed to technology at a far younger age and in a very high dose. And I think there's like pretty good data that suggests that exposure to technology really messes with our frontal lobes and our attention span, but may also mess with some of these other things that we're talking about, like nonverbal working memory and working memory. And the reason that it really messes with our attention span is when we use a device, the people who make the stuff on the device are working very hard to keep our attention. They're doing all the lifting with bright, even if we look at that TikTok, someone added some creepy music to make it more engaging. The more engaging the internet becomes, the less engaged our brain is. So if the whole world started using personal drones to fly around and we eliminated stairs and walkways and we just flew everywhere, carried, if we took elevators instead of stairs every time we went anywhere, we would become physically deconditioned. And what we're seeing in society today is a mental decondition, a neurological deconditioning. And so part of what I think what we're seeing is that it's not necessarily that everyone has this diagnosis of ADHD, but we're seeing that people's brains are being affected by technology and they're moving in the ADHD direction. So we see less emotional regulation, right? We have all these people nerd raging on the internet or X, right? Like people just yelling at each other all the time. Like the internet is like, it's like a bunch of people just emotionally vomiting into a swimming pool. And if you go on the internet, you're just swimming around in just a pile of vomit, this emotional vomit, where people are trolling each other, ignoring each other, saying all kinds of like hateful things. And this all floats to the top. Even the stuff that you disagree with floats to the top, and you engage with it because it makes you angry. So this is what's going on the internet. So we see emotional dysregulation. We see a lack of attention. We also see negative impacts on the perception of time. And all of these things are consistent with ADHD. So I really think that our society, like our technological input, is making our brains closer to ADHD. It's affecting our brain development. I see this a lot. Like, it's scary what's going on in schools, where like teachers are complaining more and more and more that kids are becoming more and more incapable of anything. There's a lot of learned helplessness and inability to operationalize problems. So like when a kid has a problem, they like don't know how to fix it. Like there's a basic decay in like kids being able to fix their own problems. Like cell phone usage is a huge, huge, huge problem in schools right now. It's a mess. That combined with like a lack of like proper reinforcement, or like we don't, apparently like kids don't get punished anymore. So like, you know, there's no consequences for actions. So then there's all kinds of problems in school. So this is what's going on with ADHD. I mean, so some of it we're diagnosing more. The other really interesting thing is that there are some studies that show that advanced parental age correlates with the degree of neurodiversity. And the really interesting thing is that there are some studies that show that even paternal age matters. So most of the time when we're looking at like impacts on the fetus and the child, it appears that the age of the mother is very important. But specifically when it comes to studies of things like autism spectrum and neurodiversity, the paternal age appears to have an influence as well. So we don't know exactly what's going on there. So people are having kids later. This all results in a greater appearance of ADHD. Now, the last thing is people say, oh, like, I don't know if I actually have ADHD or I'm extremely lazy. I'm actually lazy. So I want to ask y'all, what is laziness? What is laziness? See, we use this term lazy. And like, we're not sure what we mean by it. Right? So like in the brain, where does laziness come from? And people think that laziness is a lack of willpower. But I'm going to show y'all, it's really cool that someone mentioned this because we've got some really interesting research about this. So, would y'all argue that behavioral inflexibility, insensitivity to response feedback, diminished goal-directed persistence, do y'all think maybe this is what laziness is? Limited ability to regulate your emotions, diminished self-regulation of motivation, poor self-regulation of arousal in the service of goal-directed action. Does that sound like laziness to y'all? Kind of sounds like laziness to me. And then let's look at this one. Oh, did I get rid of it? Yes. Oh, beautiful. Thank God I have this paper still pulled up. A moderated mediation analysis of conscientiousness, time management strategies, effort regulation strategies, and university students' performance. So there's a lot of interest in 5-factor personality analysis. And one of the 5 factors in the big 5 is conscientiousness, which is the ability to work hard towards a goal without gratification. And everyone thinks, oh my God, if you have high conscientiousness, you have won the game of life because this means you are not lazy. But this is a really cool study that shows that conscientiousness in and of itself does not determine whether you are successful or not. That the effect of conscientiousness is mediated by time management strategies and effort regulation strategies. Okay? So results of both studies indicate that the effect of conscientiousness on academic performance, so it is not just that the more conscientious you are, the better you are at academic performance, is mediated by using effort regulation strategies and time management strategies. See, when you're very, very focused on climbing to the top of the ladder and you play 15 hours of video games a day and you're grinding, people wonder, why can't I grind in real life the way that I do in video games? So this could be that you're actually highly conscientious. The problem is that your conscientiousness is mediated by certain skills and strategies, like time management strategies and effort regulation strategies. So when you lack these strategies, you can't perform academically, but the conscientiousness can come out in the topic of video games, relating to video games. And the reason for that is because the video games do these two things for you, right? They make it easy for you to regulate your effort by giving you small rewards along the way. And they make it easy for you to manage your time by helping you forget that you have anything else to do. And then you queue up for a thing, and then you get into a match, and then you leave, and then you jump back into the queue. So time management and effort regulation go out the window. Okay? Do executive dysfunction, delay aversion, and time perception deficit predict ADHD symptoms and early academic performance in preschoolers? Delay aversion. Oh, I'm lazy. I can't delay my gratification. I'll do it tomorrow. I'm lazy. I procrastinate. Do y'all understand that procrastination requires the dimension of time? Because we know that perception of time is impaired in ADHD. See, lazy is the lazy person's word for the concept of laziness. There is no lazy center of the brain. And willpower or an absence of willpower does not explain laziness. Laziness is a umbrella term that describes all kinds of neuroscientific mechanisms. And we don't know what those mechanisms are, so we call it laziness. So if I suck at a video game and then people say, tell me about your gaming. You say, I suck at games. That is a lazy way of describing it, right? So what does sucking at games mean? Does this mean that my accuracy is bad? Does it mean that my strategic thinking is bad? What does it mean? So laziness is not a thing. It is actually 1,000 different things. And since we don't know what those things are, we call ourselves lazy. Procrastination and laziness is a combination of time blindness, an inability to control your arousal, an inability to regulate your emotions. Because when I'm lazy, I don't feel like doing something. What does that mean? Feel like. What is the neuroscientific mechanism of feel like? There's an emotional component, right? And here we see it. So if we go to this thing, this is great. Go to this one. See, when you can regulate your emotions, you can move from any one of these squares to any of these other squares. When you can regulate your arousal, you can move from any of these squares to any of these other squares. You can go from here to here every single day if you know how to regulate your emotions and regulate your arousal. That's it. Hi. Your turn. Okay, let me wrap up. Give me like 5 minutes. Regular 5 minutes. Okay? So people will say like, oh, I'm lazy. So learn these things. Right? So how do you regulate your arousal? How do you regulate your emotions? Like we have a ton of different stuff on that. Like we have all kinds of stuff. But what I want to know, like what I'm like trying to signal to y'all is that a lot of what we perceive as problematic is like an imprecise understanding of what the actual problem is. And once you are able to correctly diagnose the problem, then you can treat it, right? Good diagnosis precedes good treatment. And the biggest problem that I see in ADHD right now is that we don't understand what we're actually dealing with. Even clinicians don't understand the depth of what goes on in the brain with someone with ADHD. Right, so I don't think I read a single Russell Barkley paper when I was in residency. Maybe they were assigned and I just chose not to read them. But I think like this very deep way of thinking, because most of our like mental health training is really focused on like diagnosis and treatment at a very surface level. Right, there's a lot of clinical like how do you adjust your medication dose, and there's a lot of good stuff. Like it's all important stuff to learn. I'm not saying it's not useful, but there's so much depth to this. And the sad thing is that as a clinician, you can't understand all this stuff. There's just way too much. I mean, like, you know, I have the luxury of reading 400 papers and building a trauma module. That's why I understand trauma the way that I do, in addition to clinical experience and good training, and had some great mentors. But like the average clinician doesn't have the time for this. Right? They just like don't have that. Like I have, you know, I read papers for 10 or 12 hours a day, and like I'm lucky, like I can do that. It's part of my job. So if y'all are struggling with ADHD, you know, it can feel like you're lazy, it can feel like you're procrastinating, it can feel like, oh my God, do I have ADHD or do I not have ADHD? Everyone says they have ADHD. Chances are, I don't know if you have it or you don't have it. That's why you should go see a clinician. But here are the two things that I would say. Whether you have it or you don't have it, if you notice these deficits, there are things that you can do to correct them. That's the important thing from our perspective, from the scope of our relationship and the work that we are doing here. It is not to diagnose you and treat you with something. It is to recognize that these mechanisms are at play in these particular diagnoses, and they have certain antidotes. And whether you have the diagnosis or not, whether you are blind to the perception of time because you have ADHD, or you're blind to the perception of time because you're stuck on a device and you wake up in the middle of the night and you go to the bed in the middle of the day, whatever the situation is, understand the problem and take control of it. That's what we're here for. Because the cool thing about all this stuff is that it goes beyond diagnosis and treatment. There's so much you can learn about yourself that goes beyond diagnosis and treatment, that goes beyond taking a stimulant medication and getting a label. And so what we really want to do here is empower you to understand those things. This is not a replacement for medical treatment. It is not one or the other. That's not why we're here. Literally, I'm a doctor. And the reason I showed up here is not to do the work of a doctor. It's to recognize when I had patients in my office, there's so much stuff that they can do outside of the office. And this is what I saw in my patients. 2 patients come in with the same diagnosis. One person gets better, one person doesn't. What's the difference? The clinical intervention is the same. It's my dumbass either way. What is the difference? The difference is what they do. I see people in my office for 1 hour a week. They're asleep for 56 hours of the week, right? The rest of the time, 56 hours of the week, they're asleep. 1 hour they spend with me, so 57 hours of the week is out the window. There is a whole pile of other hours left to them. It's what they do in those hours that really makes the big difference. So that's what we want to help y'all optimize. It's all the other hours of the day. 5 minutes is up? Okay, let's call her back. She says it's her turn. I don't know if it's her turn for what. Let us call her. Hey, I'm ready. Okay. She said she can't believe I'm calling her. My bad.
Okay, hold on. With the sweater or no sweater?
Sure.
That's not an answer.
Yeah, put it on.
Sweater?
Yeah. It's big, but it's fun. Dr. KB hyper-focusing on papers? Yeah. I'm hyper-focusing on papers today. You better believe it. Okay, am I staying?
I need a couple of tech help things, and then you can go.
Okay. What do you need help with?
Because we're mostly talking about you, so
Okay.
I don't need to subject you to all that. You gotta be careful with the banging, bud.
No, put it over here.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, guys.
You gotta move forward. You gotta really speak into it.
Hello. Okay. Can I fix this? This is so awkward and uncomfortable. Is this better? Can y'all hear me okay?
No, you gotta speak up.
Well, let them...
No, I can tell right here. You want to be in the yellow.
Okay, does this go like this? That's better.
Yeah.
That's way more comfortable. Hey, is this better? Am I in the yellow? I'm in
No.
the green.
Yes.
I have to yell. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Am I blowing out ears? Okay.
What else do you need?
Kabir linked stuff for us
Okay.
to play. Hey guys.
It's a good thing I wore pants today.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the behind the scenes stuff at HG and take any questions and show you guys some fun stuff about from the trauma guide set.
Okay.
Prepare to be traumatized. Yeah.
That doesn't sound good.
It's not.
Okay. All right. So then we're gonna have to really.
Is this both chats together?
No. This is one chat, and this is the other chat. So I can move this kind of over here.
Yeah, I want to hang out with both.
But the problem is that it's hard to.
It's like picking a favorite kid.
No comment. Okay. So let's do
Like
this.
Twitch was our firstborn.
Okay. All right. So I will help. Do you want to show this or you want to talk first?
No, I want to. Okay, I can't do anything if I can't see. If I can't see the chatties. Okay.
Okay. I'll just be right here for you.
Oh no, I can't talk about you if you're right there.
No, but
I'm here to reveal secrets.
Okay. When should I check
To
back
leak.
with you for?
Well, first play the video for.
Okay, we're gonna play the
them.
video first. Okay.
Yeah, and it's gonna be painful for you, so you can leave.
Okay, I'll play the video and then I will come back. Okay, so we're gonna.
Oh,
do
okay,
this.
chat's over there now.
Yep.
You gotta make it whoosh whoosh.
What does that mean? Whoosh whoosh.
The mental health May and like the PIP and
What?
you know when it whooshes.
It's gonna whoosh in a second.
Yeah. Well,
This?
yes.
Okay. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and mute you
Why?
because then it'll play through our speakers,
Oh, that's not good.
and then I don't have it set up to where. We can give it a shot. It is the one that I feel the least good about today.
Like me.
But I don't. Alejandro, this feels kind of.
You need it to move to the side.
Because I'm a fan of gesticulation, and I feel like it'll.
Okay. That's a Trevor.
While you do this, they keep
How important? Yeah, this is way better. Yeah, perfect. Thank you, buddy.
I think we can.
half of Alex's wardrobe is
I need some help figuring out.
the trauma guides, or from when we shoot guides, and we have to buy new shirts.
Yeah. Honestly, same.
Sandmont.
Okay. Don't do that.
You know,
Don't
reincarnation, karma.
I can't see chat is my problem.
Okay. Can you look, look up and, yeah. Oh my God.
It is really quiet.
Should I give you like a Kylie Jenner wing?
I don't know what that means.
I've been looking
But I
into that for
assume the
months.
answer is no.
Who?
Them.
Yes, if you
Chat, where's my concealer?
Kylie Jenner is different from Caitlyn Jenner.
Yes.
Are they related?
Yes. Kylie Jenner's their daughter. Look up. Just keep your eye open and just look up.
So lots of late nights on set, so they're concealing all the under eye and losing my makeup. It's a good thing you married somebody with the same skin tone. Yeah.
Can I just keep it closed?
Okay.
Don't click anything. Tell me what you want.
I want chat.
Yes, you can make my life harder.
Every time I open my eyes, there's a Kavita finger going. It's like
I know. Oh God, but if when you don't keep it open, it doesn't work very well.
okay. Then I'll keep it open. Let's go.
Okay.
It's so hard.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Let's go.
Such a diva you are, Alok.
I think we may have taken it too far with butt chutney.
But
I think you might have taken it a little too far with butt chutney. Ew.
Your thing with butt chutney is honestly
I can't
so
imagine
destructive.
Kruti was okay with that at all.
No, this is a daddy daughter thing.
I know, but she knows about it. Yeah.
She also says it with an accent,
when you read about like, how to manage
and then she'll be like, "Oh, I have these. Look, I have this thing for butt chutney," and then she'll stick it in someone's face. It's great.
Have you before? I tell why. I don't know if it's the lens. It might just be coating on the lens.
Powder and my brush.
You don't want to shake it.
Yeah, I don't want any.
Okay, where the fuck? I mean, I could do like a factory reset and then punch
No,
the
no,
settings back
no,
on. Let's see if we can find them.
I haven't seen any of that.
If we can,
For
I mean,
months.
like it's the easiest correction in post. I just don't like looking at it.
And I mean, the other thing is like the lot on here was already loaded.
You're looking very golden medium.
We're watching some behind the scenes from Alok
Golden
on the
medium.
set of the trauma guide.
Okay.
This is intro. Take one. Maybe comment. Work.
So welcome to Dr. K's Guide to Trauma. And so as we know, experience is the best teacher. So the trauma is about to begin. Prepare to be traumatized. Yeah, that's a terrible intro. So this is going to be, fuck. I remember how hard this is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get started, no worries.
It's okay. It's okay. Get there. This is a guide about trauma. And so the first question becomes, what do we mean by the word trauma? Unmute this.
You can
so
go
now.
now.
You're. I know. I'm going.
Go, go, go.
But you want to? I'm just going to set up chat for you the way that you like it, and then I'm going to go.
Thank you.
Let me just close out some of this stuff. Okay. Give me just one second. Okay, there. Don't touch anything. Just call me if you need something. Okay. You have your phone?
Okay. Yeah, I have it. Do you have yours?
Yes, I have mine. But where's yours?
It's right here.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Call me if you need something.
Okay, guys, so I'm just here to answer questions about the trauma module and anything else you might want to know about Healthy Gamer. And if it's too quiet, just let me know. But I'm really hoping that this setup is working because I don't know how to fix anything. All right, any questions from anyone? How do I stop being lazy? I believe I overheard that lazy is the lazy person's word for being lazy. But I probably got that wrong. Guide to makeup, right? His skin looks really good in this. We took a lot of care of his skin because, so what happens is up until the guide, Alok is very particular about his like eat, sleep, hydration, caffeination during these shoots because he is filming, like he is talking to a camera, like blah, 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 for like 10 hours, 8 hours a day. And he's got to like, I think Big Cow told us, they're a production company that work with us on producing the guides. They told us that essentially they get like 4 feature films worth of footage for one guide. So one guide has 4 movies worth of film, and it's just him monologuing. So we do a lot to take care of his voice. We do a lot to take care of his skin because it's stressful. So every once in a while there'll be a breakout. We take a lot of care of like his diet. He sleeps in a very particular way. It's a whole thing, like, and it's for weeks, right? So before we shoot, about 3 weeks before we start shooting, we're sitting down with Big Cow and we are doing a script review. So we're going through and we're cutting, because every mental health concepts, like, they're all related. So, and the way that the guides are is like one thing goes into the next, it goes into the next. And so when you're sequencing everything out, it's hard to not be like, oh, and we're going to learn more about that later, or you preview a topic and then you have to cut it. And anyway, there's just a lot of going through the script before. So this process starts 3 weeks before he sits in front of a camera with the production company. And before that, he is writing the scripts. And that takes 4 weeks about. And before that, he's doing the research read-throughs, and that takes months. And before that, he's sketching things out to say, like, well, it should be this topic, then this topic, and this topic, and this topic. And before that, he is doing the research pools, and that's where he's saying, hey, Jake's our research manager. He'll say, hey, Jake, pull me everything you know about PTSD. Pull me all the most recent stuff about complex PTSD. Pull me everything we know about post-traumatic growth. And so he'll do these different pools. And as he's going through the research, there will be different concepts that are popping up. And then there will be a secondary or tertiary, sometimes 5 rounds of research pools where he's editing, like, okay, this concept was in this paper, but this is outdated. Cross that out. New concept, more updated info. So it's about 2 years in the making, with like literally everything we know about trauma. And when I say we, I mean like the scientific community, because we are pouring through mountains of research. And it's really cool. And then meanwhile, so Alok is shooting all of the videos. And then the team, our development team and our product team, is going through and saying, okay, what if this needs a worksheet? What if this could use a glossary definition? How do we want to design these worksheets? How do we make this concept a little easier to understand or a little bit more visual? So there's a lot of really amazing graphic work that the team has put together. And then on top of that, we've had so much feedback about the guide interface. And that's a whole monster because, you know, it started off with 3 modules and we were like, okay, if it works on mobile, great. But if it doesn't, like most of us are on our PCs anyway, but that was during the pandemic. And now here we are, and it has to be mobile compatible and all this stuff. So it's a lot of work. Are we paying Jake enough? Honestly, probably not. And that's something that I really want to work on. A lot of our team comes in very mission driven, and we really want to be able to grow people here, meaning we want people to have a career with Healthy Gamer. And that's why you're going to see, you know, some of the price increases and stuff like that. And we started off wanting to make this like super, super, super affordable for everyone. And as inflation has inflated, as people have been with us for a while, you know, we're really saying, let's pay people what they would make somewhere else. They deserve it. They're putting in that much work here. So that's why you're seeing some of the price increases the way you are. And I just want you to know that it really goes into building a team. There are about 200 people on the Healthy Gamer team at this point, including mods, coaches, editors, staff. It's a big ship to steer at this point. Can mental health workers reference your work in their sessions with clients? Yeah, sure, please do. We actually just stood up the HG Institute, which has accredited trainings for mental health clinicians. So if you want more clinical language or more clinical data in some of your clinical work, you can get credit for that at the HG Institute. I fix my lipstick. What positions are you hiring for right now, if any? We are hiring, as we stand up the Institute, we are currently recruiting and going through the process for our coaching operations. We are, you know what, we're looking for more designers to contribute to all things growing the brand. Because one designer, if you're a designer, you know, one person who's great at brand design isn't necessarily going to be the best illustrator, and they're not going to necessarily be the best animator. And if you're an amazing animator, you're not necessarily the best video editor, the motion graphics artist. So if you're a designer and you want to contribute, send us an email at team@healthygamer, and we'd love to, you know, work with you guys. And I think that's honestly one of the most gratifying parts about this whole thing is being able to work with the community, source a lot of talent from this community, and that get it factor, plus so much talent and so much, I think, intrinsic motivation to do the right thing for the healthy gamer community is what makes this team so, so special. I appreciate that it takes a ton of work, but it still feels weird to me that the guides are commercial products. I don't know, maybe I'm just a freak. I don't think you're a freak. Here's my take on it. One is, if Healthy Gamer was a nonprofit, we would be up here constantly asking for your donations, and we wouldn't be able to put our heads down and do the work. And I know this because I used to run digital strategy at a marketing agency for nonprofits. And I saw on the P&L, I saw all of this money that they could have been spending on programmatic work, they're spending on fundraising. And it's super inefficient. So I didn't like that model. It could be free, which is why we put out so much free content at such high quality. And you'll see Alok explain things soup to nuts on a given topic for free. The guides have a lot of work. There's a lot of expense for those guides, and I guess we could get them sponsored. But I don't like that either, because then we'd be promoting some commercial interest. And you know, we've had conversations with different people who want to sponsor things, and like the whole mission and the rationale gets completely warped. So the answer we landed at is price them as affordably as we possibly can. That enables us to keep growing, but make it affordable. So that's what we did. What are your plans for the summer? Meaning the teams as a whole, any projects. So Mental Health May is like Christmas plus, I don't know, 4th of July plus like Memorial Day all together. I guess Memorial Day is in May, but it's like every holiday together in one. So after May, the whole team is encouraged to go ahead and take their time in June or July. We'll be traveling. Alok really wants to go on like a fairy tale kind of vacation with our girls. So we want to go to like castles and lakes and rivers and all that stuff. So we're thinking about a vacation to like Central Europe. And we just got a pretty cool invite to hang out with some YouTubers at the White House of all places, and I've been invited to speak at a couple events and also in Washington. So I'm really excited to be able to like contribute more on mental health policy. So that's really exciting. And what else for this summer? This summer we're taking it easy with the kids. Last summer we did a lot of summer camps and things like that, and our kids are like, can we just be home? And I'm really excited to kind of just hang out with them. I feel like we get such little quality time with kids these days because, you know, they get home and if they have extracurriculars, and when you get off of work, it's like 6:30, and then it's bedtime, dinner time, bath time, bedtime. So I want to like actually hang out with them. Thank you, Tamatadial. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I agree. I think there is a universe where someone like Alok, with someone who has the knowledge base that he does, would be selling this for 10 to 20 times to 50 times as expensive as we do. And it's really important. I would rather 10 to 20 to 50 to 100 times people get access to what we do. So that's why we price the way we do. The guide right now, if you have okay, I might get this wrong, but please check. It's on the healthygamer.gg site. If you have purchased all modules before, and when you purchased them, they were $20 a pop, the trauma guide is available to you for $20. If you purchased them when they were $25, they're available for $25 during pre-sale. And then on the 20th, it'll go up to $30. So it's still $30. It's not, you know, it's the price of, I guess, like a really nice entree at a nice restaurant. No, it's not $200. No. Is there any discount on the guides for people on the AOE tier? I don't think there's an additional discount on top of the pre-sale, but I think for members, we are making some of the resources from the guide available. But don't quote me on that. I think we're still trying to figure it out. Are there going to be guides for dating, relationships, and social skills? This is such a good question. Alok and I argue about this all the time. Because it's dating / relationships / social skills, the scope on a guide like that keeps getting bigger and bigger. And to me, this is my point of view. I want a guide on addictions before a guide on social skills, and here's why. I see Dr. K's guide as a way to get clinical level education out there. So on actual mental health conditions, disorders, diagnoses, because we don't do that in coaching, but that is where there's such a huge need. So to me, the guides are clinical and contain like capital M, capital H mental health education. Whereas our coaching complements that with all of the way forward. Now that you know all this stuff, what do you do with it? How do you implement it? And the best outcomes I see across everything Healthy Gamer does is on dating, relationships, and social skills in coaching. So groups in particular, we've priced them to be super, super affordable. So that way you have a place to practice. Because here's the thing with dating, relationships, and social skills. You can have all the theory in the world. But when it comes down to like in the moment, what you say, how you react, can you pause? Can you depersonalize? Can you do all that stuff? Group is a great place to grow that. Is there an OCD guide? No, not to my knowledge. I think we touch on OCD in the guides, but there's not a specific guide on OCD. If that's an interesting topic to you guys, one thing that we're doing is we're starting to collaborate. We're starting to plan how to collaborate with other mental health professionals because obviously, I think Alok is brilliant. There are other professions and other professionals that we've met that are amazing at things like skills building or have a real expertise in childhood trauma, for example, or childhood, like if you start an addiction or a substance use as a child as opposed to as an adult, that kind of looks a little different. So people that specialize in that. So let's say you start experimenting with marijuana at the age of around 14 or 15, right? That it looks different for different people. So having specialists in that, or specialists in, so we're talking to somebody who has a specialist in addiction, someone who has actually run rehabs, someone who, these are different people. A lot of them are on our advisory board if you want to check them out on the website. And it's just cool to bring in other perspectives. So if you guys have questions on mental health topics that we haven't really talked about much at Healthy Gamer, I would love to know what those are. Feel free to drop those suggestions in our subreddit or in the Discord, and we'll see who we can source. I am not a clinician. I am a healthcare management MBA, so I run all of the operations at Healthy Gamer, all of the not so glamorous stuff, all the thorny problems and growing pains. It's a really fun company, but it's a lot. Normally, this is when I've spent my whole career in startups, so year 5 is usually when the company is growing up, and that is a harder stage. Yeah, I'm technically Alok's boss. No, I did not get my MBA online. I got it in person at Boston University. How can we best support and promote HG? That's so personal. I love it when people kind of take what they've learned and keep growing. I don't necessarily feel the need that everybody should be posting about us or donating. Like, we're here to give people what they need the way that they need it. So whatever feels right to you is what I would say. Yeah, Alok has a performance review. We need to get into it. We need to get into his performance. I think he has done amazing in many, many areas, and still some room to grow, I would say, in a few. And I think it's hard for me to give him a performance review because I empathize so much. He is a brilliant individual contributor. He's not a great manager. And when you're the brains of the operation, right, you have to be a good manager. You have to be able to delegate effectively, communicate effectively, give feedback effectively. I think Alok is actually phenomenal at feedback. He's gotten so much better at documenting and kind of clarifying what people need. He's terrible at managing his own schedule. So he often overcommits or needs people to chase him down, which is really frustrating. It was fine at the beginning. But at this point, it is, a product team needs him, a research team needs him, the foundation team needs him, the executive team needs him, the marketing team needs him. And now we're doing a few more sponsorships, which go back and forth, back and forth. The mods are like, hey, what do we do? What are we doing? So some of that just like coordinating. But I'm really glad that he has prioritized where he has, and he has prioritized being really good at the things that he's really good at. Everything else we can work on. Okay, don't mean to ask this in an unkind way, but it feels like companies really lose their souls once the MBAs get involved. How do we know the drive for profit won't undermine the mission of Healthy Gamer? Okay. Thank you for asking this. Thank you for, I think making an effort to ask it as politely as you can. I appreciate that because on Reddit, it's not always so nice. I agree. Companies really do lose their souls once the MBAs get involved. And that's why I think we hire the way that we do. We really prioritize hiring from this community. And I've seen what happens when we hire externally. And my career path has been startups. And then I worked for a startup agency that specialized in nonprofits and social enterprises. So I've also seen what happens when you hire all heart and not the skills. So for us, we always kind of do this vibe check, this culture fit. The most commercial aspects of Healthy Gamer that you're going to see are coming from me. I'm the only MBA technically, not on purpose, but more because, we don't have we don't drive so much profit that we can hire a bunch of 6-figure like strategists. That's not what we're here to do. We have a lot of really great talent. We hire people that are collaborative, that are passionate, that are really talented, and usually looking for, a place and an opportunity to shine.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Do you need anything?
I don't think so. Yeah, you can blame me for the ads. That's totally fine. You can blame me for the sponsorships. You can blame me for Healthy Gamer selling out. You can blame me for bad, like if you're not getting great customer service, it's probably because I haven't been able to fill the vacancy fast enough. But it's a big operation at this point. And because we are bootstrapped, because we are ultimately a bunch of humans that are just doing the best we can, because we're very insistent that we don't take a lot of outside capital, or that you guys are my boss, so you'll tell me if I'm doing a bad job. But most everything we are aware of, and we're working on it. Yeah, you can also blame me for this channel still existing. All right. Well, thank you guys for all of the nice comments. If there's any questions about what we're building or where we're going, I am cool with hanging out for a couple more minutes. What did you think of the Dr. Mike interview? It's funny. I thought it was a good conversation. It's funny because, he was on his press tour for the book. So he was there to talk about the book. And I think some of it was a little surprising, where it was like, wait, I'm here to talk about, screen time and tech hygiene and mental health and technology. Why are we talking about, why are we in a fight about Ayurveda? I think was a little, it was kind of a curveball, but I thought it was an interesting conversation. Code Monkey, can a coach help me find a girlfriend? No, a coach cannot help you find a girlfriend, but if there is a girl you're interested in and you are trying to figure out an approach or making a relationship last or any of that stuff, coaching has been shown and measured and studied to be able to help with that. It's so funny because Alok, I don't know if you've seen the Trauma Guide trailer, but Alok really has a hard time promoting things. This is in the performance review. He went on Diary of a CEO. He went with Dr. Mike. He's been on the news. He was on NBC Daily. And I'm texting him. I'm like, you've got to promote the book. Quit just answering questions. You have to actually promote the book. This is your book tour. I think he promoted the book one time over the whole thing. Stephen Bartlett with Diary of a CEO was like, in the book you mention, and Alex's like, and by the way, like something completely unrelated. Just because he's really passionate about the topics. He's not passionate about promoting things. Yeah, mission failed constantly. So if you see me like sneaking ads in there, it's probably because Alok didn't actually say like, oh, and by the way, you can buy it now. which is, you know, endearing and adorable, and that's why we love him. But also, come on. Yeah, he's so bad at advertising. He'll like look at me and he'll be like, do I have to say this? And that's why I was like, you know what? Fine. I will say it. It's okay. Yeah, the man cooks a lot and doesn't promote anything. All right. Have you considered financial health combined with mental health? Good question. We have considered it. Here's my thing. I am really looking for people that can do financial health without feeling scammy. And I think there's two different tiers to this, right? I think part of our community is like, I've got my stuff together. It's taken me a while, but I've got my stuff together. Now what do I do with my newly found disposable income? What do I do with this? And another part of our community is like not there yet. They're still trying to figure out how to get to that baseline, like, you know, just a place of like financial stability. And so not knowing, I think it's somewhat, I don't feel good about going like super finance bro on people who are still figuring it out. And if you're already there, I just don't think we're the best place for that. LMNOP, that is a very nice sentiment to donate to a rainy day fund. Part of the thing that we do, so we have two ways of giving back. One is we have a subsidy fund with Healthy Gamer, and Healthy Gamer's subsidy fund will cover the cost of coaching for people who can't afford it. And what we'll do is we'll match people with a coach who is trying to get hours as part of their certification. So that's kind of a two birds, one stone approach where this person wants coaching, this person needs practice. We can kind of subsidize that for free. And then another thing that we do is with the foundation, we are starting to ramp that up. We haven't been able to do as much with the foundation as like we want to. And I think that's part of just growing pains and being ambitious. But the foundation will write what we call second chance grants. And those are grants that help offset the cost of what happens when you have mental health issues, right? Because mental health isn't just, oh, I need my meds. It's, oh, I can't finish this semester at school, or I've really got to get out of my parents' house because this environment is debilitating for me, or I'm stuck in this job, but I really want to start my own thing, but I can't because of whatever reason. So I think kind of offsetting the cost of the impacts of mental health is what the foundation will write grants for. So if you want to donate to a rainy day fund, I would say the foundation's the best place. Horoscopes, any possibility of getting products FSA or HSA eligible? I'm working on this. Part of this is, I think it's the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaching that is newly FSA eligible. So we are working on getting the Healthy Gamer coaching curriculum accredited by boards that can then be eligible for some of these plans. But it's a big, like the second you step into like those more regulated areas, like your overhead costs just go through the roof. So we're kind of stair stepping towards that, but it's a big thing to kind of bite off. I think it would be amazing too. We are working on it. It is a long road and I don't want to promise you anything, but we are working on it. More family content is coming. I wanted to do something about people pleasers because I am a newly reformed, or not that new, I suppose, but recently reformed people pleaser. And I see a lot of people kind of, when you have kids and you're a people pleaser, that can be very, that can be a bad combo sometimes. So I was thinking about a video on that. Yes, I have hijacked the stream for a few minutes. I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about what happens behind the scenes, and Alok is alive and well, don't worry. MBA and people pleasing is an interesting combo. You know, it is very common. A lot of corporate grind culture comes from people that are ambitious, capable, educated, and people pleasing. And when you put them all together and ask them to compete, that's when you get these toxic hustle work environments. Oh, what was the question about regional pricing? It's probably, can we do it? Okay, so regional pricing is tricky for a few reasons. One is, on the coaching side, we don't have like apples to apples for like where the client is, the coaching is. So for coaching, regional pricing doesn't necessarily work. We have coaches all over the world, but things are paired more on goals and availability, sometimes language, but not always. Like the more segmentations you do, the more like permutation combinations there are, and the more complicated things get, the harder it is to make a match. So adding regional pricing to that gets really wacky. The other part is for the guides. It's probably a simple plug and play tech solution. We haven't been able to prioritize that because we're going through so many growing pains around having clients in 100+ countries. The team has prioritized Spanish language translations for the guides, so that should be available soon, which is really that's really exciting, but we're doing it one language kind of at a time. I'm looking forward to better AI-enabled language solutions, but everything we've tried is like when the language is so technical and there are so many analogies and it's sprinkled with like gamer language, the AI translations just get wacko. How has the book performed from your POV? You know, I feel like if the book Alok wanted to write was about male mental health, and I think that book would have performed better. The book that publishers wanted him to write was for their moms. So I think it's performing. I know the impact is there, and because we're mission driven, I think it's the right thing to do. I am not, sometimes in publishing, you want a book to kind of make that bestseller list. And then once it's on the bestseller list, you can say it's a bestseller. And then once you say it's a bestseller, then it will stay a bestseller. And so there's this like weird, engineered, like just get it on the bestseller list and then it'll actually sell. Which is, I don't know. But this book, I think, will be relevant for a really long time. So instead of like a quick splash, for it to have staying power on an issue that will continue to be an issue, unfortunately, for parents trying to raise kids in this age, I think it'll be relevant for a good long time. So we're in it kind of for the long haul, more than like, you know, a quick buck, I guess. Is the coaching good for a 14-year-old with ADHD? good kid, but very determined and difficult for mom to guide sometimes. So wondering if coaching would be good, helpful. P.S. Love your mission and support. Thank you, Bella Spy. 14 is too young for our coaching program. Our coaches do have supplementary certifications to be ADHD informed. So a lot of coaches really can work on those organization, routine, alerts and reminder systems, helping like carve out good like tech hygiene to be able to like focus and things like that. So our coaches can work with ADHD folks. Of course, it's not treatment for ADHD, but it can help somebody with ADHD like figure out a good routine and lifestyle. But 14, I wouldn't say coaching. We do have parent coaching for parents that are trying to kind of figure it out. And we know that it's really tough right now. Is Alok interested in making a cooking guide? Alok is interested in all sorts of things. I think he's got some fiction books started. I think he's like a grill master. He is making up all sorts of like kids stories for our kids. So he is very like a million different projects started, but I don't know. A cooking guide would be a lot of work. Okay, I see a lot of questions about Teal Swan. I don't really know who that is. Wait, no, I have heard of her. I don't know what you want me to answer exactly about Teal Swan. Yes, classic. Someone with ADHD with a lot of like ideas and start stops. How much actual hell is Alok really doing? He seems like he has multiple lives. Yeah, he's doing a lot. It's really funny because I think if I was under that much stress, like the way I would cope with that stress would be pretty self-destructive, I think. But the way he copes with this much stress is he's just gotten really into like a meditation routine and really like prioritize going to the gym, working with a trainer, all that kind of stuff. So I'm really proud of how he's handled this much stress and like public scrutiny on him. It's not easy. Sometimes I see the things that people say about him and like my heart breaks for him and they're not even talking about me. But I don't know. It really takes a lot to be able to handle that much public scrutiny on you. Gentrify, we probably will be doing another round of coach recruiting later in the year. The requirements and qualifications are you either hold a independent certification from a coaching institute like ICF or the NBHWC or a different coaching institute. And if you don't, you can get HG Institute provides the certifications at no cost. Behind the scenes, yeah. So for the trauma guide, I think there are a couple of behind the scenes clips. On the original 3, anxiety, depression, and meditation, every episode has a behind the scene kind of outtake. Will Dr. K be on any more podcasts? I think we're going to take a little bit of a break over the next couple of weeks to kind of rest and relax from Mental Health May and all of the madness up from it. And then there will be a couple more collaborations coming up later in the year. Has there been any talks of a retreat type of offering or even a conference where the community can get together? We would love to do this. When we do it, how we plan for it, all of that is very complicated. We really do want to do this. I can't see it happening this year, but I can see it happening next year. What's the status of the tandoor oven? All right, let me tell you what happened with the tandoor. We got the tandoor and we marinated a bunch of stuff and we made all of the like dough for the naans and the flatbreads, and then we started putting everything on the skewers, and he would put it in the tandoor and everything just slid off. So there's just a bunch of burnt stuff at the bottom of a tandoor. I don't know if you've ever seen a tandoor, but it's like a cylinder. So it all just goes down and you can't like reach down and get it because you'll burn your arm off. So there was that. And then we made the naan and what you're supposed to do is like stick it to the side of the oven. So we'd stick it and it would fall down. And eventually all of the aunties just got irritated and they were like, let's just use the stove. So that's what happened with the tandoor. And hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. Where can we keep track of all the collaborations? If you can find out, you tell me. I can barely keep track of all the collaborations. I think on the YouTube page, there's a featuring Dr. K section where kind of like the best of goes there. Yeah, tandoor skills issues for sure. He's great at the grill. And every year we throw a big holiday party and we usually do a bunch of stuff on the grill, which is Alok's happy place. One, because I think it's good for his like introvertness, because he can just like hang out by the grill and talk to people kind of one at a time, because there's the way that the space is, like they kind of have to be like either right beside him or kind of behind him or like over there. So he can kind of just like call out to them every once in a while. So I think when we throw a big party, his introvert self is happiest at the grill, talking to people one at a time. Which honestly is a great party hack if you're an introvert. Just be like, I'll take care of the drinks, and you just be the drink pourer and you can talk to people one at a time. Or like, you know, I'll stock the whatever, and you can kind of just hang out by the chips or the, I don't know, whatever is going on at the party. You can like just be responsible for one of the more high turnover food items, and you can talk to people one at a time. I can go either way, where I'm introverted or extroverted. So when I'm more introverted, I'll like play bartender or whatever else. Or I'll like take the coats or whatever, just to help more one-on-one interactions. Does he pause your conversations to think? Our conversations can be real painful because we'll just sit there, stare at each other, look up, kind of craft the perfect sentence in our head, and then we'll say it. And the other person will be like, well, what did you mean by this? And we'll like clarify each other 6 or 7 times. It's our conversations are painful, but we like are very one and done. We don't have to talk about the same thing over and over again, which is really nice. Like it is full closure on whatever it is that we were talking about. Does Dr. K ever get angry? I think he runs out of patience. At the end of the day, he can not have a lot of patience, but he doesn't get angry. He's just kind of like, he'll just say, I don't have the patience for this right now. Like it's the most like emotionally aware way to be angry, I guess, but it's not really anger. it's not even frustrated. It's like, you know, you're trying to put the kids to bed. They're jumping up and down and just kind of like, girls, I don't have the patience for this right now. I'll be back in 10 minutes kind of, and that kind of thing. Christopher Dodano, what paths would you recommend for someone like me who struggles with issues close to bringing me to the S word, but lost my job, so don't have the money to spend on good help? I'm really sorry you're going through this. I'm not an expert in this. Money should not be a barrier. Actually, Crow, you're modding, right? Can you link the the full mental health resources? Because there's a bunch of, because there's like a crisis line, and I feel like some people hesitate on the crisis line because it feels very last resort. But honestly, the crisis lines are great for helping navigate to good resources. Thank you. Wait, there's the resource packs, but isn't there the... There it is. Thank you. It's the explorer.healthygamer / Thank you. All claims he isn't psychic or physic. Do you agree that sounds like something someone who psychic would say? No comment. Angelo saying the crisis line is a great resource. I agree. What is my meditation practice? I am what's called a tantric. So I do more like chanting and something called a yantra, which is something you kind of look at and meditate on. Are these fake plants? Fun fact, every plant that's ever been in here has died. These are all fake. They used to all be real versions of like a beautiful palm and orchids and vines. They're all dead. What happened to the Dan TDM interview? Unfortunately, we're trying to reschedule it. I think there were some last minute kind of health emergency. There are windows, but we keep them closed for this, but also it's like the front of the house. So I don't know. Our neighborhood is very, like we are very suburban. I don't know if you guys have seen like Desperate Housewives or Weeds or any of those shows, but it's very like all the neighbors know what you're doing and we're the total weirdos because we're home all day. And I don't know, like all of our neighbors are like accountants or IT professionals or doctors and all these like respectable professions. And we're just like home all day, all like screens and iPads and everything everywhere. Yeah, Degen house. I think some of the neighbors talk. How do you pick a meditation in the guide to do? So meditation, in my mind, should not be hard. Like it should be something that makes you feel good and that is easy for you to kind of slip into. So I would give them a shot, try a couple of different practices, and whatever feels good to you, do that one. Meditation, if meditation is like, oh, I can't focus or I can't do this, I would start with something that helps you get in the habit more than something that you think is like idealistic for, I want to do that one. Happy birthday, Il Presento. All right. Well, it was really fun hanging out with you guys. Thank Thank you guys so much for all your support. This is our 5th year doing Healthy Gamer. This is our 4th Mental Health May. Every May is a lot of fun with you guys. It's a lot of work. So I just want to shout out to all the mods, our editors, our amazing community, the staff, all of our coaches doing such great work. It's been a really fun and very gratifying month. I'm really looking forward to the trauma guide. I hope you guys love it. I hope all of the content helps, and it's always great vibing with y'all for a little while. I'm going to get Alok in here to help me figure out how to turn this off. But thank you guys so much. I'll see you guys soon. I'll be right back with Alok. Alok? Alok? How do I turn it off? Yeah, I'm done. You want to come say bye? All right. Thanks again, chat. See y'all later. Alex's going to come turn stream off. Really appreciate y'all. Bye.
Good job. Thanks. You're lovely. Oh, thank you. All right, chat. Did y'all have fun? Bring her back. We shall bring her back. Dude, there's a reason I married the woman. She's great. So thank y'all very much for coming today. I don't know what y'all talked about, but apparently I'm not supposed to be here, which is totally fine. So I know we were all over the place today with ADHD, which is, the irony. But thank y'all very much for coming. Have a nice and safe weekend. And we'll see y'all. I think we're streaming. When next stream? Dr. K. Let's see. We are streaming Monday, probably. Okay? And then we are stream Wednesday. And then we are stream Thursday, and then we are stream Friday. So we are in the middle of Mental Health Awareness Month, which means that we are stream a lot, chat. And we love y'all. Take care. And we will see y'all on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Adios.